we're changing gears a little bit. You guys know I've got a 4Runner, call it Project Sport Runner, and hard to believe I've had it like 20 years. And it's coming up on needing some restoration. And it's kind of weird to me to think that I've had a car long enough that it was new, and now I'm having to restore some of the stuff on it. And I'm gonna start with like a maintenance regimen. And I've got a bunch of parts, everything from lower ball joints to hatch struts. These come summer, or warm weather and cold weather, by the way. More on that when we get to that project. New drain bolts, new armrest. I actually went with a real leather one, and some color issues and stuff there. I have to pick out a color. I'll talk more about that. Differential, transfer case, transmission, power steering fluid. I've got everything I need, and I'm gonna start today with the suspension work. And this 4Runner is a 2002 model. That makes it a third generation 4Runner, and they're known to be legendary in terms of reliability. And I know of some that have gone 500,000 miles, maybe more than that. But they do have a couple of, I don't know if I'd call it a design flaw or an engineering miss, but definitely a couple of Achilles heels that can actually destroy the vehicle. And with a little bit of maintenance, you can avoid most of that. Anybody that's been around these knows the lower ball joints are the first major issue. If one of these breaks, the suspension actually separates, and I'll put a picture in here of what can happen, but the front wheel will basically peel off, tear up the body, tear up the axle, and they usually, insurance companies total the vehicles now because of their age when that happens. They don't really take into account that they're becoming classics and they're a little bit more desirable. I get offers all the time, people want to buy mine. So we're gonna start with the lower ball joints. I'll show you the part numbers on these. I recommend you go back with factory Toyota parts. That's what I did. For what these cost, I think online discount retail is about $115, $120 per ball joint, so a little expensive, unfortunately. But for how long they last, the ones on mine were originally replaced under a recall that Toyota did about 17 years ago and probably 100,000 miles. So I figure these are about 100,000 mile service life, give or take. There's a way you can test them. I'll show you that in a minute, but it's a little tricky. But here's the part numbers. 43340-39465 and 43330-39585. Obviously you got different for driver and passenger. I am going to need a couple of special tools. These front-end service kit, you can go down to your local auto parts store and basically rent this. You buy it, when you get done you return it. I'm hoping one of these pullers will fit over the tie rod end and the lower ball joint and make this job pretty easy. And while I'm at it, I think I'm going to adjust the suspension. It's got the very popular Bilstein 5100 shocks with the Tundra TRD coils. It gave it about a 2-inch lift. The shocks are adjustable. They've got perches, and mine are on the lowest setting. It's been on there about 12 years, I think, 100,000 miles, and I'd like to raise it up one perch. So I'm hoping I can just use these coil spring compressors, compress the spring enough to get the perch to move up, move the little C-locking ring that holds the perch, and put it all back together, but we're gonna have to see how that goes. And finally, the rear sway bar end links are shot. They are the factory ones. Years ago, I upgraded to ADCO sway bars, front and rear, to give it better handling. And looking through the toolbox, lo and behold, I found these original front sway bar end links off the truck. The ADCO sway bars came with new front sway bar end links, but not rear sway bar end links. They're still stock, and you'll see with my lift, the sway bars, you know, tilted up a little bit, and you really want it horizontal to the ground. And the ball joint in the sway bar end link is all shot. Surprisingly, I found these in the toolbox, like I said, and they're just a little bit longer than the factory rear sway bar end link, and I think they'll be a good match for the lift that's on the truck. It's got about a 2-inch lift on it. I'll link to the top of this video a playlist of all the stuff that's been done to that 4Runner so you can catch up if you'd like. But that's the plan, is to put these on at the same time. Now we're going to get after that suspension, and I'm going to start by getting the truck up in the air on jack stands, get the front tires off. You can try to perform an on-vehicle ball joint inspection. There's a couple of ways to do it. What you're looking for is any movement in this area. So you can put a pry bar in here. You can watch this area very closely, and you can apply force. I'm applying quite a bit. and I'm not seeing anything moving, which would lead me to believe that that ball joint is fine. However, notice the grease that is seeping. That's what sort of gives me some concern. I don't know that I 100% trust the on-vehicle inspection, and the field service manual says only 0.5 millimeter of movement. Anything more than that and it's out of spec, and you're supposed to use a dial indicator that would go on here and mount this way, and you could see if there was any movement. I don't have one of those. I've usually just visually inspected them like that at every oil change just to make sure they weren't grossly out of whack. But I'm going to be real curious when I pull this off how loose that actually is. Again, they've got right at 100,000 miles on them, and this 4Runner has about a 2, maybe 2.5 inch lift. Make sure you pay attention to the ball joints because they are side specific. These are marked L and R, so it's pretty hard to mess that up, and it's always from how you're sitting in the vehicle. But the 39585 is your passenger side and your 39465 is your driver. I think I mentioned they come with new Castle nuts and cotter pins, so you don't have to worry about that. But you will need to buy a couple of cotter pins for the outer tie rod end. And those are the ones I picked up. I picked up 1/8 inch, 2 inch, and I can just trim off if I don't need it that long, and these are stainless. So make sure you check those parts out before you get ready to install. And I did pick up new lower ball joint bolts as well. Here is the part number 90119-10933. You'll need 8 of these. For what they cost, I think they were less than $2 a piece. It was worth it to me to replace them. And Spiker Engineering a couple of years ago actually did a pretty thorough test on these lower ball joint bolts. And the black ones with the washer on them were actually the best. They provided the most clamping force. They used some special equipment to test all this stuff. The previous bolt was a, I forget what you call it, like a cap head bolt, or flange bolt, I think is what it's called. It's got kind of a flange on it, but no washer. And these actually tested way better. And he actually tested loosening them and then tightening them back again. And these lost only 20% of their clamping force on second use. Mine I know have been used once before, so I went ahead and replaced them. It's probably cheap insurance. I've laid out the tools I think I'm going to need to get this done. My light, an assortment of sockets. If you're just doing the ball joints, I think it's mainly a 24 and a 19, and then whatever you need for your sway bar end link perhaps. Mine's a 13 millimeter, some extensions, a hammer, a great big pry bar. That's probably something. I already mentioned the tie rod end tools or ball joint tools, whatever you want to call these. I borrowed these from the local parts shop. I am going to be using impact guns. I've got this one. I like my battery powered ratchet. It makes things go really quickly. And I think I'll let this guy over here. This is the big boy that I'll use mostly to get all these tight bolts off. I use a lot of DeWalt stuff. Milwaukee has come a long way, and if I were buying stuff today, that might be what I get. But since I already got DeWalt, I'm invested in their batteries. But here's what you're looking at. I did get out a couple of wrenches just in case I need to get into some tight spaces. And you will need torque wrenches. They can go up to at least 105 foot-pounds and down to 37, I think, is the lowest you need for the ball joints. You have to go down to 25 or 18, I'm sorry, 18 if you're going to mess with the strut. The top strut nut is 18. But I'll go over all that as we go through it. Well, let's get to work. I'm going to start by getting the cotter pins out of the way for the outer tie rod and the lower ball joint. Pretty straightforward. A little bit of leverage is your friend. There's one. There's two. I'm going to go ahead and disconnect the sway bar just in case. I don't know that it's necessary, but I definitely don't want it fighting me. Now I'm going to loosen all of the lower ball joint bolts, but I'm not going to remove them just yet. That's way too tight, I think. And I've even put some penetrating oil on it. Now that I got all the bolts loose, I did wrap the spindle with a rubber bungee cord. I don't expect anything crazy to happen, but I feel better knowing it's secured. If it jars or something, it can't go too far. So with that done, we're going to get the smaller puller on the tie rod end, pop that loose. And when I'm doing something like this, I like to flip the castle nut over and use it sort of as a, not only as a guide for the puller, but also with this nut in place, if when it breaks free, light's flickering, you don't get anything crazy happening. It just drops to the top of the nut and stops. You don't have it flinging everywhere. So that's how I like to do it. And now you have to slide this puller in here, and you want to be careful of the boot. Make sure it's on the lower ball joint and not on the boot, because we're going to need to reuse that. Basically the exact same procedure for lower ball joint bolt. I'll flip that over. And the reason we had to take the tie rod end off so that now we can maneuver this, the spindle, give us room for the puller. And this is the bigger one from that kit that I rented or borrowed or whatever you want to call it. We don't have to be as careful with these boots because we're replacing this, but I still like to use good technique. I expect a decent bang out of this one. Oh yeah, that was a good one. All right, to take the tension off that ball joint, I'm going to jack up the lower control arm a little bit. Now I'm going to take out the rest of these 14mm bolts. I'm going to go to a low-powered impact on that one. I didn't want to start it with an impact, so I didn't want to break one of these bolts in there. I feel like it's loose enough now. There's some corrosion on that. I'm glad I replaced these. Now, I can take off the castle nut, and this should be ready to lift out of here. Let's see. Yep, there we go. So I always like to compare old parts to new parts. So here's the original ball joint. You can see it was leaking quite a bit of grease. That's yeah, 100,000 miles on these though. So, and I think one of the updates Toyota made during the recall is these dust boots. I've seen some trucks with them and some trucks without them. Since mine has it, I am going to put it back. So I'm going to take that off first. We'll transfer that over to the new ball joint, but I wanted to really compare them. That one says KR, this one says GR. I'm assuming that's for right side. Big question is, how does the, let's wipe that off. How does the ball joint feel? Let's see. Not gritty. It is not gritty. That's good news. The real test, there's a specification for this, is you thread this nut back on, and then I think you move this back and forth like 5 times, and then you put probably a needle or some kind of torque wrench that can measure resistance, and you turn the ball joint and measure the resistance. And you turn this like 4 times. You know, you'd have your torque wrench connected here, and you'd be turning it like this, kind of monitoring the torque it took to make that spin. And on the 5th turn, you would read the reading. And I think they want something like 22 inch-pounds, something like that. This one feels, surprisingly, with all that grease everywhere, it actually feels pretty tight. I mean, it might have gone it might have gone a little while longer, but again, for what they cost and for what happens if it breaks, it's cheap insurance. My truck's got a lift on it, so I'm probably going to go to a 100,000 mile interval on these, or 10 years probably. 10-year or 100,000 miles is probably what I'm going to use. I want to compare that to the new ball joint. Let's see if I can get this. Put this nut on here. We'll check it and see if it feels any different. I can tell you it's probably, from a stiffness perspective, 25% more stiff. That's about the best I can describe it. And then this, in terms of rotating, that's way tighter. That is way tighter. So the new ball joint is 2 or 3 times the resistance to turn it. So yeah, I feel pretty good about replacing them. I think it was time. I've cleaned up the little dust boot with a little engine degreaser. I don't like putting dirty parts back on the car. And you have to pay attention to how this gets oriented. There's little recesses for the bolt heads. So that's how it goes. So if you have one of these dust boots on yours, make sure you pay attention to that. Now this, as I said, came with a new castle nut and cotter pin. This is ready to go back on the truck. And hopefully you can see that 3 out of my 4 bolts, lower ball joint bolts, they were very corroded. Try to get that close. So highly recommend you replace these if you're doing this job. I can't tighten the lower shock bolt to 101 foot-pounds until I've got some tension on the suspension. So I need to go ahead and reinstall this lower ball joint. Let's see. Got it prepped with the dust cover. Don't forget that if you had one. I actually like that. And then like so. And it's a little funky because everything wants to move around, but the gist of it is to try to get the 4 bolts to line up with the spindle. I found a combination of wiggling it around and using a pry bar. Looks like that's going to work. Start them all by hand. And with those just snug, I'm going to go ahead and put the castle nut on. Now I can hook up the tie rod end. And when you're working with this lower ball joint, you want to make sure the hole for the cotter pin is facing towards the front of the truck. A little tension on the top with the pry bar. That gets 105 foot-pounds, so 105. And after it clicks, you got to kind of look to see if the castle nut and the cotter pin hole line up, and I think mine do. If they don't, not a big deal to make a slight adjustment if you have to, just to get it centered. Don't forget to bend it over. And the tie rod end castle nut is 67 foot-pounds. And just like the lower ball joint castle nut, you may have to manipulate it just a tick to get the cotter pin to line up. All right, I moved it just a millimeter. Now we got it. And this is that cotter pin I had to buy, so I'm probably gonna have to trim it. It's a little bit long. And finally, tighten the 14 millimeter. That's what these are, right? Yeah, 14 millimeter. Lower ball joint bolts. If you have this style, it's 37 foot-pounds. The ones with the washer, black ones with the washer on it. And I'm gonna do it in a cross pattern. That's it. And now, as promised, I'm going to get after those rear sway bar end links. I did prepare this one. I think I mentioned before I painted it, but I went ahead and also greased the shaft area where the bushings go. Number one, so it doesn't squeak, but number two, that area collects water and gets blasted with debris. So I'm hoping that'll protect it maybe from rusting. And I did put anti-seize on the threads. And my top nut for this is 12 millimeters. Yours may be different. And I find it's easier when working with sway bars, especially if you've got different length end links like I'm about to put on. Just disconnect both sides. That way the sway bar moves free. And my bottom one's a 17 millimeter, and you may need some channel locks because sometimes they'll want to spin. And inspecting it, you can see why I'm putting grease on the new one. Look how rusty that is. Now this has been on here 20 years, but that's in bad shape. The boot on both of them are torn, but surprisingly, you can see in there the ball joint actually looks okay. There is still grease, and it isn't gritty, which is a shocker. But these weren't the right length. I just improvised back when, used what I had. Now that I've got longer ones, I expect the boot and everything will be a little bit happier. Install is just the reverse. You want to make sure you sandwich the part of the frame with the bushings. And my new one, I think this is a 15 millimeter top nut. Straight. And the torque on the bottom bolt is 51 foot-pounds, if you care to torque it rather than just getting it good and tight. And this one has a flat on it that you can put a wrench like this on if you happen to need it, but mine didn't. And the top bolt on this one is 14 foot-pounds if you care to torque it. Okay, with all that done, all that's left is to get the wheels and tires back on the truck. And don't forget to torque them to 83 foot-pounds using a star pattern. Now that is a maintenance log. This week we're going to continue the restoration project on Project Sport Runner here, our 2002 3rd Gen Supercharged 4Runner. And today I'm going to tackle the differentials and the transfer case fluids. About, I'm about to look, I think it was 15 years ago maybe, at 60,000 miles. This is what I used in the diffs and transfer case. It's been almost 100,000 miles in 15 years and it's done great. So I'm going to go back with this again. Can't take credit for this. Saw it online. I made one myself. This is just my implementation, but I'm going to use this for my transfer pump. And if you missed it, I showed you how to make one and the parts you need, and I'll link that to the top. But in a nutshell, I'm going to fill this up with the gear oil and then pressurize it. And then I made a little spout. We'll just hook that in there, loosen our valve, and fill up the diffs. It should go pretty smoothly. The only caveat, this should be a super straightforward project. The only caveat to that is it is a 21-year-old vehicle at this point, and it's been 15 years and 100,000 miles since those bolts have been taken loose. So I got my fingers crossed, none of them give me a real hard time. I believe it's a 24 millimeter for the rear diff fill and drain plugs, and the same for the transfer case. So I've got that. Got my ratchet, gonna need it. The front diff's a little bit different. For some reason, Toyota went with like a inverted hex. So you're gonna need something like this. I'm not sure if mine's a 10 or a 12, but I've got both, so I'll figure that out once I get down there. But these are known to strip, unfortunately, so I'm gonna have to take it easy and be careful with that. I did, however, get bolts. They're not hex. Hopefully you can see that. And I'll show you the part numbers for these in a second. But I replaced them. These are Lexus parts, but I wanted to get rid of those hex so I never have to worry about them again, and replace them with like a normal drain plug with a bolt on it, so it's less likely to strip. So I got that, the fluid, the pump I talked about, hex I talked about, and then some gaskets to go back and replace the gaskets or the washers on the drain plug. So I'll show you the part numbers now. So there is the front diff drain bolt. There's the front diff fill bolt. Again, those are Lexus parts, so if you're looking for them, you need to look under Lexus. This is the diff I can't remember if this is drain. Yeah, these must be drain gaskets for the diff and I think the transfer case too, maybe. I'll figure that when I get down there. These are crush washers. So this says, I wrote diffs on it, so it must just be the diffs. Front diff drain plug gasket. So that's the drain plug for the front. And then this is the transfer case. And obviously I'll compare to what I'm taking off the truck. But there's your part numbers if you want to replace those parts as well. Obviously you'll need a catch pan. I am going to be using my creeper. I am going to be using my battery powered cordless ratchet for the skid plates, and they are a 12 millimeter. And because mine has the sport bumper skid, whatever you want to call it on it, I need an extension to get the front skid plate off, so I've got that too. I'm going to start by getting the skid plates out of the way. All right, now I'm going to check and see what size these plugs are. That one feels like it is not a 12. This says 10 on it. Let's see if it's a 10. All right, that one's the fill plug. It's a 10. The drain plug. Pretty sure that's also a 10, but I'm gonna double check. Okay, your mileage may vary, but on mine, both of these are a 10 hex. And while I'm here, since the front one tends to be the one that gives the most trouble, I'm going to hit it with some brake clean. Try to clean the threads out. Get a little scrub or clean I guess the hex hole out, I should say, really. Just got some goop in there. Give me the most chance of success of getting that loose. Clean that up a little bit more. There's quite a bit of goop in there, actually. I'm gonna go ahead and hit the drain bolt too. And then I'm gonna give them a little baby tap with a hammer. Just in case there's anything that might break up. And finally, I'm gonna hit them with a little bit of penetrating oil. While I'm up here, I'm gonna find out how much trouble this is gonna give me. Always try to remove the fill bolt first, because if you drain the diff and then you can't get the fill bolt off, you might be in a pickle. Let's see, that just popped up. Make sure, remember it's lefty-loosey, lefty-loosey, righty-tighty. My socket wrench is marked on and off, so I can't mess that up. You want to make sure your hex hole on your plug is very clean, like you saw me do. And if you have to, you could use a couple of light taps of a hammer to make sure it's fully seated. Mine's pretty clean. I'm pretty lucky this truck isn't too rusty or anything. Then, oh, I got lucky. So that one is now, that one's loose. Let's try make sure this is still set to off. It is. Let's try the drain bolt. Maybe I'll get lucky with it too. Whew, that one's tight. Try another angle. Ha, got lucky with it. Ha. I don't know if the taps with the hammer or the penetrating oil. Let it soak for about 10 minutes. But those two are now loose. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and take the fill bolt all the way out. To be honest with you, these two were the ones I was most worried about. Hopefully, drain pan ready. There's what the drain bolt looks like. Nothing out of the ordinary, I don't guess. Now I'm gonna take the fill bolt. I mean that was the fill bolt. I'm talking backwards. Got too much on my mind. Fill bolt. Now we're gonna take the drain bolt out. And this one probably has a magnet on it. I'll make a mess. It's pretty clean, actually. There's the magnet. Hopefully you can see. Very little gook. Just a little bit of grease, really. I don't really feel any. Take a closer look at it over on the workbench while this drains. Okay, here is the fill plug. Gonna give you a better look at it. Mine was a 10 hex, and there's the washer that was on it. I'll have to match that up with what I've got over here, and I'll compare part numbers too. And on the drain bolt, the washer, copper washer, actually stayed with the differential. So if you saw that in the video, you got a good eye. I had to go back and just pick it up, but that's the copper washer. And then here is a close-up of the magnet. Like I said, I don't feel anything. It's very soft. It's just almost like grease. Not very gritty. Yeah, I think everything's, it smells like gear oil. I think everything's good there. And this has got, I mean, obviously it doesn't run in four-wheel drive all the time, but this gear oil had 100,000 miles on it. Still look good in the front. 15 years or so, give or take. I'm gonna go ahead and prep the new fill plug. And like I said, I went this direction so that I would never have to worry about these hex. These, I don't know, done it once before and they survived both times, but maybe I just got lucky like you saw. So I'm gonna switch to these. So this is the fill, and now I need to figure out which gasket it is. I think it's this one. Goes on that. We'll find out. I believe the flat side would go against your, flat side would go against your bolt. So that one's ready to go. And then this is the drain bolt. And as you can see, it has a magnet on it, just like the original. But again, it's a bolt instead of a hex. We got a new copper washer for that. I know that for sure. That's it. Yep. All right. Those are ready to go. And these new plugs are 14 millimeter. So that'll make it nice. And just to be double, triple sure, because I don't really know, I mean, it could be another 15 years before I do this. I don't know what kind of environment this truck is going to see over the next 15 years. So just to be double, triple, quadruple sure, I'm going to put just a touch of anti-seize on the threads of both the fill and the drain, especially around the area where the washer will be. And that's just going to give me a little bit of insurance that, you know, even if it's in, you know, salty, snowy weather a lot for the next 15 years, hopefully this will prevent some problems. Okay, looks like it's pretty well done draining. I'm getting a little small drip, but that's no big deal. I'll go ahead and I did clean all that up, wiped it up really good, made sure there's nothing weird in the threads. I'm going to go ahead and install the drain plug. Don't forget your washer. And the torque on this guy is 48 foot-pounds. There we go. Now I can fill the little, I'm gonna call it a fluid transfer pump with diff fluid. Ready for that. And I made some notes whenever I'm doing a lot of work like this with torque specs and fluid amounts. So the front diff takes 1.22 quarts according to the field service manual. So I'm probably going to just put 2 quarts in it for now. Plus the first time I'm using it and make sure it works. And then make sure your ball valve is closed. I almost forgot, started to pump this up. And then all you do is just pump it up to build a little bit of pressure. And then all I should have to do is put this in the fill hole and open the valve, and it should easily fill the differential. Usually this is kind of a pain in the butt job where you have to use a pump or something. It's super messy. If you're going from one bottle to the next, gear oil gets everywhere. So I'm hoping this will make it quick and easy. First time I've used it, so we're going to see. I got my fingers crossed. Hoping this valve works well. This is 3/8 OD clear vinyl tubing, so that means the ID is a 1/4 inch. Same for the little valve. It's 1/4 inch. So I don't know. It seems like it was flowing okay. It's not super cold, and I stored these in the house last night so that they would be reasonably warm to hopefully let it flow a little bit faster. So let's get into the truck, see how it does. All right, we're going to open the valve, and I can see fluid flowing. So we're going to let that go for a minute. I'm going to keep an eye on the container. It's flowing pretty quick, actually. Not bad. When I see it start to pour out of the fill hole, that's how I'll know it's full. Okay, as you can see, it is pouring out. That means we are full. Don't forget your washer. Remember, flat side towards the bolt. And I'm happy to report that little fluid transfer pump worked great. Not the fastest thing in the world, but honestly, if you're just laying under the car watching it, who cares? It seemed to me, let's see, I'm looking at my watch. It seemed to me like it flowed about a quart every 4 minutes. So that's how fast it goes. And that's with, I wasn't going crazy with the pumps on the pumper either. Just enough to keep it going. And this one is, let's see, it's torqued to 29 foot-pounds. I'm double checking my torque wrench. I think I heard a click. So that worked really, really good. And you can see it's got a little storage spot if you use the tube that came with it, like I showed you when I built it. And I'm going to take the pressure off of it because I got to put more fluid in it anyway. And now I can go start working on the transfer case. Transfer case, pretty much same procedure. We're going to loosen the fill bolt first and then the drain bolt. And I think this time I'm going to leave the fill bolt in there. Maybe that'll prevent the fluid from just shooting out like the front diff did. We're going to try that and see. And I did spray these down with a little bit of penetrant oil. See if it'll make these easier to come off. And these are both 24. Hopefully you can see that, 24 millimeter. Lefty loosey, righty tighty. Yeah, that one was easy actually. Good news there. So I'm just gonna leave that one snug. I'm gonna get ready for the drain. That was loose. I'm gonna grab a rag just in case. Oh yeah. All right, pro tip, leave the fill bolt in until you get the fluid started draining. And the transfer case drain bolt does not have a magnet. It's just a regular bolt. There is a washer on it, so pay attention to that, make sure you get it. And actually the fill plug and the drain plug look identical. So I'm just gonna go get the two washers and fill up the little pump, transfer pump, while this finishes draining. And I did put a little bit of anti-seize on both the drain and fill plugs. And there's nothing special about the transfer case plug washer. It's just a regular washer. It doesn't crush or anything, but you definitely want to make sure you put it on. And I'm down to just a drip, so I'm going to go ahead and reinstall the drain plug. And get our handy dandy fluid transfer pump in place. I'm really happy with how this thing has worked out. It's the same as before. We'll let it fill until it starts to just trickle out of the fill hole. Then we know we're good. And the book says the capacity on the transfer case, and this is a 2002 automatic, I don't know if it matters, is 1.3 quarts. And I'm starting to see it come out. So we're going to turn off the pump. Install the plug. Don't forget the washer. And the torque spec on these is 27 foot-pounds. And it's pretty much rinse and repeat for the rear differential. I did turn off the parking brake, but make sure you have the wheels chocked. You know, be careful so that this cable could be moved out of the way. Give me access to the field bolt. It's also 24 millimeter. All right, there we go. That is now loose. And you want to probably make sure you're using a 6-point socket on all these. Just be double sure you don't strip anything. That was tight. I'm about to get a longer ratchet for that one. And that's all it took. Sometimes you just need the right tool. All right, and just like last time, I'm gonna leave the drain or the fill plug in so it doesn't go everywhere. And I'm gonna get a rag just in case. You know, no matter what, the rag's always at the other end of the shop. Every time I need it. All right. I'm probably gonna get a little bit messy on this deal. Oh, I didn't. This one does have a magnet. And actually the oil doesn't look too bad. Try to get you guys where you can see this. You see it? About 100,000 miles on it, 15 years. Not terrible. And these drain plug gaskets are the crush type. So you want to put the smooth side towards the plug. Got 2 left. And I always like to inspect the magnet. So I'm going to go ahead and take these old gaskets off. You see that? Doesn't look bad. I don't feel any chunks. And this one would be the one that gets the most use, obviously. I feel just some small shavings, but I bet that's all normal. Just some little ones. But that's what the magnet's there for, is to catch all that stuff. So there are the drain and fill bolts all cleaned up. Cleaned the magnet up really good, and the washers are installed. Ready to fill the rear diff. Call this project done. Okay, we're down to just a drip. Just like before, I'm gonna just wipe it off, reinstall the drain plug, make sure you got your washer. And it's rinse and repeat again on the fluid. This rear differential is the non-e-locker, and it takes 2.59 quarts. If you have the e-locker, I think it's a little bit more than that, maybe 2.6 or 2.9, maybe 2.91. And I have found about 20 pumps from the pump sprayer, or fluid transfer pump we're going to call it, is about right. And then when it starts to flow kind of slowly, I'll pump it up, 15 more times. This one's going to take a minute since it's 2.59 quarts, give or take. And I think I said it's about a 3 minutes a quart flow rate. All right, I can see the diff fluid is just about to start coming out. I'm going to say that is full. Don't forget your washer. Both the fill and the drain get torqued to 36 foot-pounds. That one's good. Tightened him up a little bit earlier. There we go. So I found a online deal, and I ordered a pack of 6 of these, thinking I would have about 3/4 of one left over, and it was pretty close. So there's how much is left in the container, and I don't know how much that is, but it's, if a half gallon's here, that's what, maybe a quarter of a quart, and then 1 full quart. I wanted to have 1 left over just in case I ever need to do any top-ups or have to do some more work or do something and I need it. I've got it here on hand. So that's sort of where it ended up in terms of fluid. And I'm going to wait a couple of days before I put the front skid plates back on, just so I can keep an eye on those front diff drain and fill bolts to make sure, particularly the drain one, just to make sure I don't have any leaks. So I'm going to wait to do that. And other than that, that's a complete project. Pretty easy to do, and I might have gotten lucky. Either the liquid wrench worked really well, or maybe a little tap with the hammer, or I'm just lucky. But none of the bolts gave me any trouble. They all came off nice and easy, and it made it for a pretty nice, relaxing project, which was nice for a change. After doing the suspension before, that was a pain in the butt. And that's another project complete on Project 4Runner as part of our restoration. Today, I'm going to be working on the automatic transmission fluid service. So that's what we got in store. I'm going to show you how I'm going to do it. It's been about 15 years since I did that service, and I used Mobil 1 synthetic ATF, and it allowed me to go to 100,000 miles, and that's right at 100,000 now, 15 years like I said. So it's time for me to do it again. The second option that some people do is they just take the drain bolt out of the transmission drain pan, which will drain around 3 quarts. We'll find out today because I'm going to start with that, but around 3 quarts. And then they just top up through the fill, the dipstick for the transmission, the fill hole. They just top it back up with those 3 quarts, and they might do that once a year. And the thought process there is over 3 to 4 years, you've basically recycled all to new fluid, because drain 3, you put 3 in year 1. I think it holds around 11. I think the field service manual says 11 quarts. And the way I'm going to do it, because I just want to do it once and know I'm good to go for a while, is you can disconnect the return line from the radiator and hook up a new piece of hose into a bucket. You probably need one that's graduated so that you can measure, and then you start the vehicle, and it's almost the same as the shop tool or the big shop machine. It's almost the exact same thing. As the transmission pumps fluid out, you add fluid in to the dipstick fill hole. I'll show you the supplies I needed to get this done. I always keep a little penetrating oil around just in case the coolant hose might give me some trouble. I replaced the radiator not too long ago, so I'm hoping that was soon enough that it hasn't stuck to the barb. I've got a little pick just in case, and you can put a little WD-40 around that barb if it gives you trouble, and some pliers to get the spring clamp off. It'll be one like this. You just squeeze it and slide it back. That'll let me get the hose off. I'm going to use my battery-powered ratchet with a 12mm to get the skid plate off. I've got some, just from a previous project, this is 3/8 ID clear vinyl tubing. This is what I'm going to use for the drain line. I'm going to connect this to the radiator outlet port and run this into this graduated bucket. And then my idea is, like I said, I'll just watch it fill up. When it gets to quart marks, I'll just pour a new one in. When it hits here, I'll pour a new one in, et cetera, et cetera. I found this on sale. It holds 8 quarts, so I'm going to have to dump it into my catch pan a couple of times probably, but this was on sale for $12. I'll leave a link in the description. You might get lucky and it's still on sale. Whoops, you're going to need a great big funnel. And I found this one. I'll leave a link to it too, and it actually does fit in the dipstick fill hole. I confirmed that, so good to go there. And finally, you're going to need quite a bit of fluid. The capacity says 10.8 quarts, but you're probably going to need a little bit more than that to get it 100% flushed out, just because you're sort of mixing some new and old in the process. And finally, you will need this little crush washer for the transmission drain pan plug, and it's part number 90301-11016, and I think this thing was like $1.70 or something. Ridiculous for that little, I don't know if the price is on here, ridiculous for that little washer, but you gotta have it. Now, I took the truck out and drove it around to get the transmission up to operating temperature. I feel like it'll drain a little bit better that way, and I wanted to make sure there wasn't anything settling anywhere, and I had everything mixed really well, so as I'm doing this service, it'll get all of the fluid and any contaminants it may have out. Right after you do that, I recommend you check the fluid level, and there's a procedure for that. You have to have the truck idling, has to be started and idling, make sure your parking brake is set, and you want to move through the gears, drive, park, 2, 1, L, and back, and then you come out, and I've already done this. You pull your dipstick tube there, and you want to make sure the fluid is between the hot marks. So if it's up to operating temperature, your fluid should be right. You want to smell it, make sure it smells okay. It shouldn't smell burnt, and you definitely want it to not be like pink milkshake looking. If you got strawberry milkshake, you got bigger problems, and your cooling or temperature control module in the radiator, in the bottom of the radiator, and I'll talk about that more in a minute, has probably failed, and you want to stop. You probably don't want to do this if you've got the pink milkshake syndrome. That is one of the few Achilles heels of these trucks. Parts of the radiator fail, and it allows coolant to get in the transmission fluid, takes out the transmission, unfortunately. So if you find that, stop. Do not do this service. Seek more advice. Best way I can put it. But I've already checked the fluid. I know it's right, and we're ready to get started. I'm going to start by getting the skid plate off. Here is the transmission pan drain bolt, and it is a 14 millimeter. Not very tight. To take that out, so I don't look at a huge mess, but it may not work out anyway. Transmission fluid doesn't look too bad, actually. Not terrible. That's a good sign. I just used a magnet to fish out the little drain bolt. All right, we're down to just a few drips. I'm going to put the bolt back in. Do not forget your little crush washer, and the flat side goes towards the bolt. So you'll notice there's like a flat side and a crush, I'll call it side. The crush side faces in towards the transmission pan. And now the torque spec on that guy is 15 foot-pounds, so not very much. So look at all that fluid that came out from just pulling the transmission drain plug. I got, hopefully you can see that, 4.5 quarts. You know, the field service manual isn't infallible, but it says a drain and fill is 2.1 quarts. So they were off by more than 100%, because that's double. So 4.5 quarts out, we got to put 4.5 quarts back in before we go to the next step. Let's pull the dipstick out. Put the funnel in the dipstick, and now we're just going to add the 4.5 quarts. So I've added in 4.5 quarts. Now I'm going to dump this container, so now it's freed up again, and I'm going to try to do it 4 quarts at a time. So fire up the truck, maybe 4 to 6 quarts until I see it running clear. So I'm going to dump this, and then we're going to get ready to disconnect transmission hose. Be prepared for that, and it's just a little spring clip we're going to slide back. You can twist it, have better luck maybe. If it's real tight, like I said, you can use a little pick and some WD-40 in there. And I'm going to put a little 3/8 rubber cap in this hose just so it doesn't drip everywhere. I'm going to set it up there out of the way. Try to anyway. Now I can figure out my clear vinyl tube that I'm going to run to this bucket. I'm going to put a cap on that too while I take a look at that so that doesn't drip everywhere. See how far. I'd like to have this container out where I can see it while I'm pouring the fluid in. That's the idea anyway. There we go. Well, there's what I came up with. I put a little clamp on the hose to make sure it doesn't go anywhere. And now we can just start the truck up and let the old fluid pour into here. I can keep an eye on the graduations and just add a quart. When a quart comes out, I'll add a quart. Quart comes out, I'll add a quart until we get 4 or 6 quarts, and then I'll probably stop and dump this and then continue until I see clear, or not clear, but clean, I guess I should say, fluid coming out right there. And it'll be easy to see because I got it right against the edge of the bucket. So due to the size of the orifice on the dipstick tube, I'm not able to pour the fluid as fast as the transmission is pumping it out. So I got to about 3 quarts and I felt like I was falling behind, so we've shut the truck off. I'm going to catch up. That's why it's important to have a graduated container, because that way you can keep track of exactly how much has come out. You know exactly how much to put back in. Once that 3rd quart fills in there, I'm gonna fire the truck back up, take it up to 6. Okay, you can see the fluid now is looking very clean in the line. Hopefully you can tell it's very clean in the bucket too. So I have put 12 quarts, or 12 and a half, through the system, and according to the field service manual, the capacity is 10.8. So I've put, you know, a couple of quarts extra through it. I feel pretty good about how that fluid looks, and mine wasn't terrible to begin with, so I'm going to call that good. Okay, I measured and I know I took out the same amount of fluid that I put back in, so we should be pretty close. The truck is cooled off, and as you saw before when I showed you a little picture, and I'll show you again, the transmission level has to be checked with the engine idling and after you go from park to low and back to park, but it also has to be at operating temperature, and Toyota considers that between, I think, 158 and 176 degrees Fahrenheit. So I'm going to fire the truck up, go to the low and back to park, and check it just to make sure I'm in the ballpark. But it's one of those things you're probably gonna have to check over time after you do this job, and just top it up to make sure you stay in that hot range. And I've got a transmission temperature gauge on mine. You can see it's barely registering 100, so it's definitely not to operating temp. We'll see what it looks like. Okay, so I'm at the very bottom of hot, and the transmission temperature is probably, hopefully you can see that, probably around 100 degrees. So I'm a little on the cool side, so I expect as the transmission fluid heats up, it'll move up into probably the middle of this hot range here, because there's the top. So you want to be somewhere in here. So I'm going to drive it around and I'll just keep an eye on it. When it's up to operating temp, I'll double check it and top it up as necessary. So just reinstall your skid plate, and that is job done. And today we're going to move on to the power steering fluid. And it's pretty straightforward. Some people do it by firing the car up and letting the pump cycle the fluid, but I think that probably moves fluid a little bit too fast. I'm going to try to just jack the front end up so that the tires are off the ground, and then turn my steering wheel back and forth and just let the pressure from the steering rack force the fluid out. So I'm going to do a fluid exchange. But since this has never had power steering fluid, at least, you know, I've had it since practically new. I know it hasn't. I'm going to pull the reservoir and clean it. There's a little screen in there that can get clogged up with gook. So I'm going to pull that. It's a little bit of an extra step, but I think it's worth it considering the truck has about 150,000 miles on it now. And to get this done, I've got a couple of quarts of automatic transmission fluid, which is actually what the power steering system takes. It's right on the cap. This is what I use in the transmission, or what I used, found it on clearance. So that's what I'm going to use to flush the system and put new fluid in, because that way I'll have some around for topping up the transmission. I'll also have it around for topping up the power steering system, and that way the fluids match. So the field service manual says it has a capacity of 0.9 US quarts. So I've got 2, that should be enough. You're going to need an O-ring, or I recommend you get this O-ring. It's in the bottom of the reservoir if you decide to go this route. Here's the part number, 90301-11016. And of course, this little O-ring, which should probably cost 3 cents, was like $2. I've got a wrench to get the spring clamp off, 12 millimeter ratchet for one of the reservoir bolts. Actually, that's a wrench, ratcheting wrench. This is the 12 millimeter ratchet. I might need an extension, of course, a light, and you are going to need some kind of cleaner. I'm going to try this brake parts cleaner to get the gook off the screen. Maybe I get lucky and mine's not too bad, so we'll see. And then I made up this little hose. I had some of this clear vinyl tubing lying around, and I just put a 3/8 barb in one end of it, and that way I can stick this into the return side of the power steering hose. and then run the other end into my graduated bucket, and I'll know when I've got, put about a quarter two through it. We should be good to go. And here's the guy we're after. I'm gonna go ahead and check the fluid before I get started. That's the cold side, and it looks like it's right on cold. So it's got a cold side and a hot side. The fluid expands a little bit, so there's hot, you can see. So it's the right amount of fluid for cold because this truck hasn't been driven in a little while. And hopefully you can see down here, there's the hose we're after. We have to pull that spring clip, push that down. The first thing I'm gonna do is use some kind of, I'm gonna use something to take the fluid out of this, out of the reservoirs, and then I'll probably put a little rubber, a cap on this 3/8 line so I don't get any leakage when I disconnect that line. So let's get the reservoir emptied first. Yeah, that looks like weird fluid. And this is old Krusty on the turkey baster, so he's a mess. Yeah, hopefully you can see it. That fluid's kind of black. I assume Toyota transmission fluid is red like everything else, but if you know different, let me know. It doesn't smell like transmission fluid, but I've had this truck pretty much since new. I know that's the first time it's ever been changed. Very weird. I'm gonna give that hose just a spritz of WD-40. Might help it slide off a little easier. And there are 3 12mm bolts that hold this reservoir in place, and then it's kind of got like a outlet at the bottom that plugs into the pump with an O-ring around it. The front bolt, you'll have to get the power steering pump pulley. You see those openings? You'll have to get one of those openings to line up with the bolt. And mine wasn't at first, and I just keyed the starter over a couple of times until now the bolt's right behind this opening, and I can get to that one. And the other two, see if I can show them to you. It's gonna be hard for me to show them to you when I'm taking them off. But there's one here, right underneath this hose, or this electrical connector, and there's one right at the bottom. If you look in there, you can see them. Hopefully you can see that. Okay, not too bad. And here is the reservoir, and I went ahead and capped, put a 3/8 cap on the input line just so it doesn't leak. There was a little bit of fluid left in it that I emptied out. And down in here is where the screen is. I'm gonna take a look. What we should be able to see is light coming through, and I see nothing. So I gotta get busy cleaning it. All that sediment that was in that thing. Took about a full can of brake cleaner to clean the thing up, but that's nasty. Before we couldn't see any. So it's cleaned up, ready to go back on the truck. Don't forget to replace the O-ring. Not everybody does this, but I recommend you do since you're here already. I'm going to lube the new one up with a little bit of power steering fluid just so I know it slides on nice and smooth. Do that and we'll clean the groove out too. There we go. Here I think is 9 foot-pounds and the back two are 17, but it's just holding a bracket and I'm not that concerned about it, so I'm just gonna tighten them up good and tight. With the reservoir reinstalled, I am ready to exchange the fluid. Here's how I've got it hooked up. Hopefully you can see a little barb for the clear vinyl goes into that return line, runs up, got it into my graduated pail here. I'm gonna go ahead and fill up the reservoir with some fluid, and with the front wheels off the ground, I can just turn the steering wheel back and forth and pump the fluid out. Okay, top that up. I used a little funnel. We're just going to rinse and repeat till we get all that old fluid out of there. ran right at 2 quarts through the system, and you can see the return now is clean. And I stopped it on the cold level on the little dipstick because it's cold. So what I'll do is I'll disconnect my line, hook the feed back up to the reservoir, and then I'll monitor it, and I'll probably check it when it's hot and top it up as necessary. And there it is, all buttoned back up. Not super terrible, just a little bit messy. You'll need a bunch of rags. And don't forget your spring clip. And am I the only one that likes to put these back exactly where they came off? I can see the indentions on the hose, so I always put it back exactly like it was. Leave me a comment if you're OCD like that and do the same thing. I'm gonna knock out the valve cover gaskets today. I put it off about as long as I could. I'd already did the trick where I went back and used an inch-pound torque wrench and snugged up the valve cover bolts, and that bought me about 18 months, to be honest. It was starting to weep just a little bit, sort of in the back corners of each side. And I could see it, during oil changes, doing inspections and whatnot. I could see it getting kind of moist back there. I went around with an inch-pound torque wrench set to 53 inch-pounds and just snugged up all of the valve cover bolts I could get to, and that seemed to help until it didn't. And I guess eventually, probably the cam plugs or the cam seals in the back, I think, are what are really leaking pretty good now, and I'm actually getting some drips. It's leaking bad enough that it's running down the back of the engine, down the bell housing, and it's not bad. It's just a couple of drips a week or something like that, but it's bad enough now that I've actually got drips showing up on the floor, and I had to put a piece of cardboard down to keep it from staining the concrete. So we're going to knock that out today, and while I've got the supercharger will have to come off, and while that's off, I'll do an oil change on it. It's got right at 100,000 miles on it, and it's never had any maintenance done. So I'm going to go ahead and change the oil on that. I'll show you the parts that I picked up and the tools I'm going to use to get this knocked out. Since I'm going to have the valve covers off, I'm going to clean them up really well. I'm going to use some simple green. I got the lavender just because I like the way it smells. I don't want to be squeezing a pump sprayer, so I got one of these. You pressurize it, it's going to spray the simple green on, and then I'll use some wire brushes and some red sanding scuffing pads to scuff them up really good, because I'm actually going to paint them wrinkle red. I figure it's got a supercharger, it's pretty well customized, why not? Here's the supercharger oil I'm going to use. There's the number on that. I'm going to use some prep all and probably some acetone to clean up the valve covers. I want them really, really good and clean. I was curious about the primer I might use on this, and I emailed VHT, the people that make this Duplicolor, and they said you can actually just put it straight on the aluminum valve covers as long as they're well prepped. While I've got it apart, I'm also going to clean the throttle body. Been a while since I did that. As far as parts go, this is the big one. It's the Seal Packing 103 Form in Place gasket is what FIPG stands for. Here's what it looks like. It comes with one of these little keys like they used to put on toothpaste to help you get every bit of it out. This is what will seal up all of the little crevices and stuff around the half moons and the edges of the valve covers where the gaskets bend. So very critical that you use this. Do not use RTV. I highly recommend you use the Toyota version. It's way better. I already reused my intake gasket once when I put the supercharger on, so I decided to go ahead and get a new one of these, even though technically I think they can be reused. I probably wouldn't use it more than twice, so this would be 3 times if I were to use it again. Got a new one of those. Here are the washer seals that you need that go around the valve cover itself, and I think these are what start to give trouble. They're rubber, so when you torque the rubber back, so when you torque them down, the rubber gives some tension and sort of keeps everything tight, and over time that obviously deteriorates, gets hard and brittle, and that's where you start to get some leaks. Here's the cam plugs. You need 2 of those. I'm going to replace the PCV seal as well. Obviously the valve cover gaskets themselves, and they're the same part number for each side. They're identical side to side. Spark plug tube gaskets, I got those too. You'll need 6 of these. And a lot of people reuse this. These are the semicircular cam plugs, or half moons, a lot of people call them. Here's the part number. They were $8 each. I figure if I'm pulling the ones out that have been on there for 21 years, why not go ahead and replace them while they're out? $8, I'm going to replace them. Here's the tools I've got laid out, just your standard sockets. I did get some wobblies if there's some tough spots to get to. The only thing special really I picked up for this are these hose clamp pliers, or hose pliers, I guess. I don't know how tight some of these vacuum lines and things of that nature, and there's a bunch of them going around the supercharger and the throttle body. These were cheap. I wanted it to make this as easy as possible, so I did pick those up. These 90 degree for the spring clips. a little pick just in case those hoses give me some trouble. I'm going to be using this a lot. Anything I can do to speed this up. Normal wrenches and all that, a light obviously. And the biggest thing is going to be staying organized. I'm going to have a lot of bolts and stuff that are going to be coming off and hoses that are going to be unplugged. So I'm probably going to use some painter's tape to sort of mark A and B, you know, A, B, B, so that I know where everything goes back. And I've got a table out so that I'm not walking myself half to death going back and forth across the shop, and I'll get the supercharger off and put it here and then kind of keep the bolts around it and try to keep everything well organized. Well, that's enough jibber jabber. It's time to get dirty. Air box is out. It's just 3 12mm bolts, super easy. I've started working on the throttle body, and like I said, I am going to label some of these connections so I don't mix them up. It'll probably be pretty hard, but better safe than sorry. It only takes a minute. Starting to get some of the hoses, and I will say these hose pliers, we're going to call them, are actually making the hoses way easier to work with. So you can kind of grip onto it like that and turn it to kind of break it free. Then you can just start sliding it off, get it started, and easy peasy. So I like that. Throttle body connection, you can just roll this back and disconnect it. I don't think I could do it one-handed, almost. You get the idea. So I'm going to take care of that next. And then there's some Allen head. Oh, that worked. There we go. That's out. Some Allen head 6mm screws on the top. A couple of, I'm guessing those are 12mm bolts on the bottom. You could take the throttle body off with the supercharger if you wanted to, or leave it connected. Since I'm going to clean the throttle body while it's apart, I'm going to go ahead and remove it now. There are coolant lines. I think it's this one and this one. So be ready for a little bit of coolant to maybe come out of those. I'm going to get some rubber caps and put a rag down here just in case. And then the throttle body just lifts off. There is one more plug on the very bottom. Don't forget that one. Right, and I intentionally saved this middle one for last so that when it comes out I can sort of just lift the supercharger off. And voila! All right, now that the supercharger is removed, you want to put something in the intake ports. I've taped mine up. Last thing you want is something falling in there, getting into the engine. So that's taped up. Now we can kind of start looking to see what we're working with as far as the valve covers go. The next thing I'm going to take off are the coil packs and the spark plug wires. But like I said, I'm going to draw a diagram real quick just so I know everything goes back where it's supposed to. This thing right here, this plastic wire loom housing is a known sticking point. This thing supposedly just disintegrates almost when you start to mess with it. It feels pretty brittle. I may actually wrap some cloth electrical tape around that just to kind of keep it all together, and you definitely want to make sure you've got this taped up before you start messing with anything. Okay, sit rep. I've been looking this over and yes, these little plastic deals that everybody says are a nightmare, they definitely are. You can see the tabs on the passenger side, they had already broken, and they're held in place with these little 10mm bolts with you can see a little bushing in there, and mine had already cracked, and there's the pieces I pulled out. So they just get old and hot, all the heat cycles, and get brittle. But what I have been able to do is kind of follow this wire towards the power steering reservoir or pump, and I disconnected it from this bracket, and that's going to give me a pretty good amount of slack on the passenger side. And I think with that, and if I disconnect the fuel injectors, I can get the passenger side one out. I can get to all the bolts. That one's that one's okay. And if I need a little more slack, I can actually unplug the sensor down here for the power steering. So I could actually get a little more, and there's another connector up here. I did take the 10mm bolts out of the timing cover, or timing belt cover, to give me a little room. I don't know that I needed to, but I thought I might need some wiggle room there. That's the passenger side. I don't think that's going to be a big problem. Grab the flashlight. Driver's side, on the other hand, going to be interesting. So this big plastic wire cover thing is just as brittle, if not more brittle than the other one, and it's much larger. It actually runs all the way around. I did find a couple of, these big connections right here, or this big wire harness. I can actually disconnect those from the brackets that they're on to give me some wiggle room there. And I think what I'm going to do is take some cloth electrical tape and just wrap this thing up as best I can, so that as I'm working with it, if it breaks, it'll kind of hold itself together. And I went ahead and stuck some paper towels in the spark plug tubes on both sides, just to keep anything from falling in there and giving me a headache. So now we're going to start working with this. And then it's a big question, which side do you do first? The driver's side's harder. Do you want to get that one out of the way, or do you want to get the easy one done, the passenger side? I'm probably going to tackle the harder one first. That's just kind of the way I like to do things. And finally, I did vacuum all around in here just to get any loose debris before I go pulling the valve covers off. Here is that really brittle loom or wiring harness, plastic wiring harness that I wrapped up with cloth electrical tape. I'm going to highly recommend that. This is the stuff. It's just cloth electrical tape. It took me maybe 15 or 20 minutes, but I think that's going to really make a world of difference. You can see now it's pretty sturdy. It was already starting to crack in a couple of places, and I just took 12-inch long pieces and just wrapped it around it till I got it all pretty well secured. And then I found one more down there. Hopefully you can see that right behind the alternator, or right beside the alternator, behind the dipstick. There was one more little clip that was holding this harness, and I unsnapped it. Look at all that room I got now. So I'm hoping that's enough wiggle room that I can pull that valve cover out. But I highly recommend you disconnect that, and I highly recommend you wrap that wiring harness up. With that all finished up, I'm going to start going after. There are 8 10mm bolts that hold each valve cover on. And remember earlier I told you these are got a washer attached to them that sort of provided tension. Well, I couldn't reach this one when it's the first one I touched when I started to take this valve cover off, and I couldn't reach it with the supercharger and everything on. So when I did my little trick 18 months ago where I just tried to tighten all the ones I could get to, I couldn't reach this one. And check this out. Look how loose it is. I can literally loosen it by hand. There was no, what about the second one? I'm curious about it. Loose. So that is why I guess these valve covers start to leak over time. Those gaskets get brittle, the valve cover gaskets themselves, everything gets loose, and you end up with leaks, but we're going to take care of it. I found this setup worked best. A couple of different length extensions. I had to use a long one for the lower bolts and a short one for the upper, and a wobbly. You could do it with a regular socket, but this made it a little bit quicker and easier, and obviously I used the ratchet. And then once I had all the bolts out, that valve cover's on there pretty good, but they give you little tabs, and you don't want to go crazy here, but you can use a little pry bar just to get in there and sort of rock it up. You got to remember there's spark plug tube seals in there too, and it's all been on there a long time. So now that I've got it broken loose, I'm now looking to see how I might get this thing out of here. And I got it. Now we're just going to do the same thing on passenger side. Oh yeah, that one was way easier. Today the goal is to get them all cleaned up, clean the throttle body, clean the air filter, and change the oil in the supercharger. I want to paint these, and I got some wrinkle red paint. Reassemble it, so let's get after it. Step one for getting these ready to be cleaned up is removing the spark plug tube seals. And I've been working on these, and I thought I'd show you guys how I've been getting these out. I've saved the last one to show you, but these are supposed to be kind of flexible like rubber, and mine literally feel like ceramic. I mean, they are not flexible at all, and they're pretty stuck in there. So the way I've been getting these out, there's a little tab right here that's holding it in, or I guess it's designed to hold it in. I haven't messed with that. I've just been using a screwdriver to kind of hopefully you can see this, get this thing started on a hammer. Be careful because you're dealing with aluminum. This valve cover is aluminum. You don't want to gouge it or anything, so just be conscious of what you're doing. And I've started trying to pry the edge of the tube seal out. Until I can get a bite on it. And once I have it deformed, hopefully you can see that, I start using a small pry bar. And I'm just going to come in here and try to get underneath it. And there we go. Pry it out. So that's how I've been getting these out. Not terribly difficult. Just be conscious of your aluminum. You have a seal, so you know, if you get a little nick, it's not going to be the end of the world, but you don't want to go too crazy. And then once I have the tube seal out, I'm using some needle nose, and I am going ahead and bending this little retainer up so that it's ready to accept the new tube seal. Now these are ready to be washed. Prep work is 90% of a paint job. So these have been degreased 4 times. I used a wire wheel on it and a wire brush to clean them up. I then sanded them with 400 grit wet dry sandpaper. You can see they're way more clean than they were. And finally I used some pre-paint prep spray on them, which is another type of degreaser. So I did that twice. Since these are engine parts, want to be really sure. And then some strategic tape. So now, ready for paint. So the only downside is this paint takes a good amount of time to dry, like 24 hours before they say you can handle it, and it says at least 48 hours before you reassemble the vehicle. Bad news is it takes some time. The good news is it means that I can now take my time working on the half moons, some people call them semicircular plugs on each end of the head, as well as the cam plug. I'm going to show you that now. I've already taken some of them out, but I'm going to save the last one so I could show you. I used some channel locks with electrical tape on them. Now I bought new half moons, but I figure a lot of people won't, and that's a way you can sort of protect them. They're aluminum pieces I'll show you here in a sec, and putting some electrical tape on there will protect them. And you want to pull straight up. They're in the edge of the head, and you don't want to go back and forth or anything like that. You could actually crack the head. You just want to grab onto it and pull straight back, and they'll come right out. I've already removed 3. I saved the last one so I can show you. There are 4 of these, like I said. There's one here and another one in the back, same for the driver's side. And I found just coming in here with these channel locks, I'm just going to grab it, and you want to try to grab it so that you can just pull straight up. And I'm actually going to pull from here, so I'm not, going to accidentally torque this. Pull from right here. There you go. Just takes a quick tug and they pop right out. I always like to do an inspection to see if I was having any problems, and honestly these really don't look like they were leaking. Maybe just a little bit right here. I think this was the back one. This was the other back one, so maybe just a little bit right there, but it's not wet and it's not going through. A lot of people reuse these. They just clean up the FIPG and reuse them. They're obviously just little aluminum pieces. I am not. I bought new ones. Why not? They're $8 a piece. I don't have to fool with cleaning them. Now the fun part, you have to go and clean up all the little pieces of FIPG from around where these cam plugs go. I've been doing it, and I find that acetone has worked pretty good. A pair of long needle nose. You want to be careful. Don't let any of these big pieces drop down into the cylinder head. You wouldn't want a piece. I mean, the oil filter will catch most things, but you wouldn't want a piece of that clogging an oil passage or something. So you have to get started on that. So this is tedious, but that's how clean you want them to be when you're done. Totally clean of any of the old sealer. And to clean those up, I actually ended up using a variety of tools. I used a razor blade, but I used it sparingly. You don't want to gouge or cause any nicks in the head right there, so be very careful with that. I did use a pick to get around some of the crevices and stuff, which worked pretty good. And I used a Scotch-Brite to finish it up, to kind of polish the rest. There was like some little bitty pieces of residue left that the acetone on a rag was just taking too long to come off. So I used a green Scotch-Brite just to gently polish it to make sure it was perfectly clean. Now we're gonna get started on those cam plugs. Here's the cam plug. I'm gonna go ahead and remove that as well, just so I can get the entire surface area of the head prepared for when I'm ready to put this all back together. And they're 10mm bolts. I'm gonna get them both started. The biggest thing here is just don't drop one. And there's a washer on the bolt, so make sure you get a hold of both of those. There's the second one. Now I'm going to use the taped up channel locks just to grab it and pull it straight up. There we go. There's the cam plug. Sometimes it comes with the cap, sometimes it doesn't. If it doesn't, just grab it. And this is why I went ahead and removed it. I want to take time to clean all this FIPG that's still on here. Oh, there's a big piece. Grab that. Another one back there in the corner. So I'm going to clean all of that up so that it is pristine before I start putting this back together. Like I said, there is one on the driver and passenger side. You can see I've already pulled the passenger side, but that's where it goes, and I've also already cleaned that one up. And when you take it out, pay attention to the plug, the cam plug. The concave side faces inboard towards the motor, and this faces the firewall, the flat side. So remember that so that you can remember how to put it back in. Obviously, I'm going to clean up all this FIPG on here and get it ready for reinstallation. I've got these caps and plugs cleaned up, ready to go back in the truck, and I did thoroughly clean all the surfaces on the head. You can see that. I used acetone on a rag mostly, a razor blade where necessary, but being super careful. But all the surfaces are clean. You'll want to pay particular attention to the hump areas that go over one of the cams down in here in the corners. We're going to put some FIPG back in those spots in the back too, where the cam plug goes when we reassemble everything. And there was quite a bit of FIPG up here that I had to use needle nose pliers to get out. Be careful, don't let it fall into the head. Same thing on the other side up front. There's a cam, there's a hump for the cam. It's where the valve cover gasket goes over. In these corners here, you want to pay pretty close attention. And I probably got it cleaner than the average person. I even used a small shop mirror to look back here in the cam plug hole, and I cleaned that several times to make sure it is perfectly shiny. But that's all I can do, because I'm still waiting on these valve covers to dry. I think in the end it's going to be worth it. That looks pretty dang good in my opinion, and it'll really set off next to the supercharger, and it has a similar finish the way it's sort of wrinkled up. I don't know if it's going to come through. It looks a little deeper red on camera, to be honest, than it does in person. But it's a nice red color, and I think that'll look good. The texture is about the same as the supercharger, like I said. And like I said, since I have to wait anyway for that paint to dry, I'm going to take the time to clean up the throttle body, change the oil in the supercharger, clean the air filter. Some other maintenance items you might want to consider is cleaning the MAF sensor while you've got everything apart. I did mine not too long ago, so I'm not going to worry about that. And now would also be a good time to change your spark plugs if it's been a while. Mine aren't that old, so I'm not going to do the spark plugs, but now would be the time to do it. I'm going to start with the throttle body. Next up, I'm going to change the oil in the supercharger, and I did go ahead and clean the supercharger up as well. If you've been watching the channel for a while, you guys know I don't like putting dirty parts back on a car. So it is all detailed out, and it's just a little 3/16 Allen head. And if you're doing this on the car, you can get a syringe and sort of put it in here. The reservoir is kind of here, and draw the fluid out. I think it's around 4 ounces, but since I've got the supercharger off the car, it's going to be a lot easier. I can remove the plug and then tip the supercharger up and empty the fluid. Pretty dark. Fluid's got right at 100,000 miles on it. So it definitely needed a fluid change. I'm measuring it in Mrs. Speedy's Pyrex dish. Don't everybody tell her. Okay, that's what I got out of it. Hopefully you can see that. I think it's easier to see on the table probably. It is about 3.5 ounces. I was expecting a little more, but that's what came out. My bottle is a 4-ounce bottle, so that's what I'm going to put back in. Yeah, it was definitely due an oil change. This stuff is crystal clear. There's the dark crud that came out of it. So that's done. And I don't know the torque spec on this bolt or this little fill plug, but it had a mark on it from where TRD originally built it. And I just tightened it until the mark lined back up. And I don't have any of the AFE cleaner, so this will do. And I looked up on Simple Green's website, and they say that this is a proper cleaner for these filters, or for performance filters. I'm going to let it soak about 10 minutes, and then I'm just going to rinse it with tap water until the water runs clear. We'll be good to go. Okay, it's been about 10 minutes. This is the side where the air goes in, so it gets filtered through as it goes to the motor. So you want to start rinsing it from the clean side, is what I'll call it. It's all rinsed out. So I'm just going to lay it dirty side or intake side down. So the side that goes to the motor is facing up. That way any extra water that happens to drain drains out and not pushes more dirt into the filter. Today we're on the home stretch of finishing up the valve cover job on Project 4Runner here, the supercharged 4Runner. We're going to get started by prepping the painted valve covers with the tube seals and the PCB grommet. So that's the flat side. You can see how the tube seal sort of recesses down. You want that flat side in the recess. So you just set it in there as straight as you can get it, and then use your socket and your hammer. And I think this would be pretty hard to mess up, honestly, because it's only going to go in there one way. And I believe that's got it. And then I'm going to use a punch. You want to be careful, don't damage the seal, to push down that tab. That's all there is to it. So the valve covers are all prepped and ready to go back in the truck, and man, that wrinkle finish turned out great. Got the PCV grommet in the passenger side. It's a little tight, so if you put a little lubricant around the outer perimeter of it there, it'll pop in. Just make sure it seats flush. You'll be good to go there. So now we just got to do the rest of the prep work, and these will be ready to go on the truck. I'm going to start with the cam plugs, and you'll notice it says to put some of that FIPG on these little edges right here and right here. So looking at the cam plug, that's here and here. This groove looks like an oil passage or something to me, so I'm going to not get any FIPG in that area. We're going to put just a dollop on here. And remember, your plug goes in with the flat side facing out and the concave side facing towards the motor. There is the cam plug installed. I made sure to seat it against this cap, so I got a little bit of space in the back, and now I'm just going to put the FIPG on here.
Then just set the cap in place. It just drops right in, and thread your bolts down by hand. It's aluminum, remember. We'll snug them up by hand, and then we'll torque them to 12 foot-pounds. That's the spec on these. And I don't know if it mattered. These caps looked like they were exactly the same driver and passenger side, but I made sure to pay attention and put them back right where they came off. So passenger side went back on passenger side, driver side went back on driver's side. And here's what the service manual says about putting FIPG on the little half moons. There's a groove, and it says to put it in that groove. I'm going to put a little bit extra. I just feel like it's not going to hurt anything. It'll maybe seal it up, make it last a little bit longer. But that's what the service manual says as far as FIPG goes. So there's how I did mine. And it looked to me like one side of this half moon is thicker, the lip on it, than the other. And I looked at the factory ones, and they were the same way. And they had the thicker side pointing into the engine, so I'm going to put mine in the same way. Next up, I'm going to put the valve cover gasket into the valve cover. And there's I'll show you this actually. There's a thin side and a flat side. The thin side obviously goes into the valve cover itself, and it will hold it in place while you reinstall it. Make sure you push it down so that it's uniform. It'll make it easier, I think, on install. And triple check these curved areas. Okay, I have put in the FIPG on top of the half moons. You can see it there, as well as around those cam humps, front and back. We're ready to install that valve cover. And I lubed up the spark plug tube seals with a little bit of motor oil. The service manual says to use multi-purpose grease, but I figure motor oil worked just as well and maybe not make as much of a mess. And I went ahead and prepared the washers for the valve cover bolts. I'll just put them on the bolt, make it easier to install. And you want to start them by hand. I keep saying it's aluminum, but it's a thing, so that you don't cross thread anything. The torque spec on these, I think I mentioned, is 53 inch-pounds, and they are a 10mm bolt. But you don't want to just start on one and get it to 53 inch-pounds. I'm probably going to make 3 passes, and the manual doesn't really give you a pattern, but you want this to seat level, or as level as you can get it. So I'm going to kind of do, a cross pattern. So here, 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 and then crisscross on the ends. And I'll probably make 3 passes before I get to 53 inch-pounds. Obviously, you want to make sure there's nothing caught, no wires caught underneath the valve cover. And I did use a little inspection mirror to make sure everything looks like it was seated good, and everything's good to go on this side. Now's a good time to go ahead and put your spark plug wires back in and your coils. Hopefully you made a diagram so you remembered where they went, but on the passenger side it's 531, driver's side is 315. You can see my notes over here where I was kind of keeping track of some torque specs. Next up, oh, and also make sure to reconnect if you disconnected, I'm sure you did, any wiring harnesses. I went ahead and connected it back underneath the alternator and on the 2 brackets underneath the driver's side manifold there. Next up is the supercharger, I think. All right, very carefully take the old gasket off. Hopefully you had it taped up. And then I wiped down the mating surface with acetone to clean up any, any kind of residue or anything before I put my new gasket down. There's what you can see what it looks like before we put the supercharger on. And once you find the studs, set the supercharger on. And then you want to start the little bolt that holds there's a bracket and a spacer. You want to do it first to hold the supercharger up. Next, I'm going to start working on the supercharger bolts. And I noticed when I took them out, they were getting a little bit of galling on them, so I put some anti-seize. Original installation, I didn't do that, but I'm going to now. And these get torqued to 13 foot-pounds, so that was pretty easy. These two aren't bad. I got those two started as well. These are all 12 millimeter. That stud right here, got to him like that. The stud in the back, I don't want to take a chance on dropping this bolt. So I'm going to use this. It goes to my impact driver, and this is a magnetic 12 millimeter nut holder. So we're going to hope for the best on this deal. I had to get a little bit creative because of the clearance. The clearance around the supercharger housing is real tight, so only 1/4 inch drive sockets would fit, and I had to use a wobbly to get in here. Did that here, here, and in the back, and an extension. So that's how I got that done. And you want to tighten the center ones first. So I did this one 13 foot-pounds, this one 13 foot-pounds, then I did the back stud 13 foot-pounds, the front stud 13 foot-pounds, and finally the middle one. Since I was using a 1/4 inch drive, I felt like my 3/8 drive torque wrench was too big to get in here, so I used an inch-pound torque wrench and just used 156 inch-pounds, which was the same thing as 13 foot-pounds. We're ready to put the supercharger belt back on. Just release the tensioner, make sure the belt goes around the alternator. That's good to go. Even though I've got water meth injection, I also have the Underdog Racing 7th injector. I had it before I had the meth, so I just left it on here. So I've reconnected the fuel line and the fuel injector, so that's good to go. And now we're down to the throttle body. And of all the gaskets I bought, I forgot to get a new throttle body gasket. I'm gonna hope this one's okay, but if I have any problems, I'll just buy another one and replace it. But I recommend that you plan for this and have a new throttle body gasket. This one's the opened up one, obviously the O. That's the popular one because of the airflow for the supercharger. Not only that, but a lot of people with a naturally aspirated 3.4 liter go to this as well. Torque spec on the throttle body bolts is 13 foot-pounds, but again I'm going to use inch-pounds, so it'll be 156, just like the supercharger. And I'm going to do them in a cross pattern, and it's a 12 millimeter bolt and a 6 hex on the top. Well, all that's left is the air box. Well, here's the finished product. And the red looks better than I actually thought it would. I was a little worried it would be too much red, but honestly, so much of it is hidden by coil packs and supercharger and hoses that it's just enough. It's almost like an accent. So I'm super happy with that. I think it sort of fits the theme of the vehicle. Let me know what you think. Let me some comments below. Tell me what you think about those red valve covers, yay or nay. So all that's left to do is fire it up, do a test fire up. I let it dry. I've been letting the FIPG dry for a couple of hours. I just want to be super duper sure it's cured. and the manual says that it takes about an hour. So it's been a couple of hours at least. So I'm going to do a test fire up. Hopefully it starts. Well, here we go. Fingers crossed. Okay, we got lucky and it started up. No, I'm kidding. I figured it would. And if I touched a part on the truck, I cleaned it as I was doing that work. But now I'm going to get into getting a really good detail of the engine bay and underneath around the oil pan. Now that I got those valve cover gaskets replaced, I want to know if I have any other oil leaks. And with the way the valve covers leak, they tend to run down the back of the motor, down to the bottom of the bell housing, and then it drips, and it can make you think you've got a rear main seal leak. I'm not seeing any more drips from this truck, but it is kind of wet back there. So I want to clean all of that up to know exactly what's going on and clean up all the oil that was leaking from before. So I'm going to show you the stuff I'm going to use to do it and how I'm going to get this done. These are going to be real handy for getting around all the plugs and wiring and all of that. A bigger brush just to make it quicker. And then the products I'm going to be using are Simple Green. I got the lavender just because I like the way it smells. I'm going to use it in my pump sprayer. This is going to be the heavy lifter right here. This Gunk Original Engine Degreaser. They have a lighter version of this and a heavier version of this. I went with kind of in the middle because mine's dirty, but it's not like crazy. And then this is a foaming engine degreaser, and this one's pretty light duty, but I got this just for any touch-ups that I might need to do at the end. And then when all of that's done and it's dry and everything else, I picked up this. You want to be careful with what you use in the engine bay. You don't want to use anything that collects or attracts dusts or anything that's greasy. And this is a non-silicone based, non-greasy engine detailer is what I'm going to call it. It sort of makes your plastics black again and the hoses nice and shiny, or satin really is what it's supposed to do. And it's kind of a spray and walk away product, and I'm going to try this out. I haven't used it before. I've used products like it before, but this is the one I'm going to use today, and I'll let you know what I think of it at the end. And see, with the battery out of the way, it gives a little more access, and I can clean this nasty thing. I mean, look at that, gross. Clean all underneath here. These plastic trays usually protect metal, but a lot of times you'll find older cars with the battery trays rusted out because it's corrosive. So I'm going to be cleaning that up really good in that area. You want to start from the top down. So I'm going to start cleaning the under hood area. I am going to cover this with a plastic bag like I said, and you'll notice I parked the truck. It's later in the afternoon, and I parked so that the hood is providing shade to the engine bay. You don't want to put these cleaners and stuff on here and do them in the sun where it's likely to dry. You can start getting some white pitting or something weird on your aluminum pieces, and I'm going to be really careful not to cause any problems when I'm cleaning all this up. And I'm going to start with just a dry brush down just to get any loose junk out of here. Be surprised how much will come off. Just loose. I'm going to use the smaller one in the engine bay, start brushing stuff, particularly around the wiring connectors and all. And I used to detail this engine once a year, and you know, get busy, other things, have other cars, so I've sort of neglected cleaning this one for a while. So it is definitely due. And I also pulled both parts of the skid plate, and they are really gross, so I'm probably going to end up using the pressure washer on those, but I'm going to do them at the end. All right, got my pump sprayer pumped up with the cleaner. I'm just going to saturate everything. Then use some low pressure warm water to spray it off. 5 minutes, all it took. And if you have any spots that you want to clean up, you can go around with a microfiber and just dab them. We're down to just a drip there. I'm going to leave the engine covered and start sort of going after some of these electrical plugs with this small brush. I want to control the water, remember, around all those plugs. If it was a brand new car, I probably wouldn't be as concerned, but these are 21-year-old plugs. They are weather resistant or water resistant, not waterproof. So I just want to be conscious of that. I'm going to try to clean up all the electrical boxes and everything really well with this small brush. And I used the Simple Green at 100% since this hood liner was pretty dirty, but I've mixed it down to 50-50 for inside the engine bay since it's not too terribly bad. I'm gonna mist just a little bit of water on the components I'm gonna start cleaning, and then hit them with a simple green, get them with this brush. Not too much, just enough. We'll put a little bit on the brush. Now I'm just gonna paint them with soap. This should make this pretty easy. And after you agitate everything with the brush, you can dip it in a little bit of warm water and then use it to sort of wash off the soap. Again, I'm trying to be cautious with not getting too much water in here because it's a 22-year-old, 21-year-old vehicle. And then just use your microfiber towel to wipe everything down. As you can see, it comes out super clean. I'm trying to get it back to as close to like new as I can. Now, it's old, but doesn't mean we can't clean it up, make it look good yet. And that's how good it looks. I'm super happy with that. It only took about an hour, so not even hard. It's actually super easy, nice day, sort of enjoyable to be outside. With the engine cold, it says spray it on a cold engine and let it sit about 10 to 15 minutes and then rinse it off with water. So I'm gonna start hitting these areas that I know are just nasty. Then I'm gonna climb under the truck and get around the rear main seal and behind the bell housing and all that, because I really want to know what I'm dealing with there. The final step is going to be our engine detailer. Even though this says engine protector, it's actually a detailer, and I've already started wiping it on. You have two options here. You can spray it on everything and it'll be super shiny, or you can spray it on a microfiber towel and wipe it on everything. It'll kind of give a satin finish. I personally prefer the satin, so that's what I'm going to do. You want to kind of hit the spots, like the big things that you're going to see, like this timing belt cover is one good example. Smells good. Smells like citrusy. I've let the truck sit for about 45 minutes to an hour. The last thing is to just go for a 15-minute drive just to dry up any last little bit of water that might be in crevices. That looks awesome. I am super happy with that. While I had the skid plates off, I decided to go ahead and restore them. I did sand them down, clean them really, really good, and paint them with some semi-gloss black paint. I did notice, and I'll show you this, on this bigger one that's up front, mine was wanting to collect and start to get just a little bit of rust in the corners here and here. So I hit those with some rust reformer, which is basically a spray that converts rust back to normal metal, and then put a little bit of RTV. I think what's happening is water's getting underneath this little steel stamped lip right here, and it sets. So I put some RTV around that on each side just to seal it off. I won't have any more rust problems. But there they are, all cleaned up and painted, good as new. And yes, I did clean up the bolts. OCD, blessing and a curse. And with those skid plates off the truck, it gave me an opportunity to continue to monitor for any additional oil leaks outside of the valve covers. Now remember, detailing the engine bay, I told you I noticed a little bit of kind of wetness on the rear main seal area, and I was curious if I actually had a rear main seal leak in addition to the valve covers, which I knew were already leaking. Well, it's been a week. You don't see a single drip. I'm going to try to show you under the truck. So this is going to be pretty hard for y'all to see probably on camera, but there is the bottom of the bell housing. You can see it is bone dry. And I did check up around the rear main seal area, and it is bone dry as well. So that tells me I do not have any additional oil leaks, which is excellent news. After the engine detail, I thought the hood liner or hood insulation actually looked pretty good, but then it dried out and I realized it's got some staining and stuff. It's been on here a long time, and you can't, at least I couldn't find these anymore. And even if I did see where they used to be for sale, it was like $200. So I'm gonna try to remove it without breaking any of the plastic clips and use some fabric dye on it to make it hopefully good as new. I'll probably test a spot on the back before I go crazy with the spray, but hopefully I can bring that back to life, make it look a little better. This is the product I'm going to try for this. Haven't ever used it before. It does come in a flat, which you can tell by the lid, as well as gloss. So make sure you pick the right one for your application. For this, obviously, I'm going to be using flat. And I'm just going to do two light coats. Normally, I'd be doing this outside, but it's super windy today, so that is no bueno. So there's what it looks like all done. 2 light coats took care of it, and it looks 100 times better. So this stuff gets a thumbs up for me. And that looks much, much better and complements the detailed engine bay. Super happy with that. So today I'm going to pull the tow hitch off of old Project 4Runner and refurbish it and clean it up. I noticed a couple of years ago it was starting to rust. You can buy a new one for about 200 bucks, so not the end of the world, but for 20 bucks in paint and probably an hour of my time, I think I can fix the one I've got. It's a little bit tricky to get off, so I've picked out some tools. Those bolts can rust in there, and I'm hoping I get lucky and mine will come out. I've been lucky so far on all the projects I've been doing on that truck, and I'll link to the top the playlist. I've been sort of doing like a restoration on it. So here it is. It's not in terrible shape, but you can sort of see it's starting to rust and come through here, and you want to catch something like this early. And I think if I catch it early, I can just buzz that down with an angle grinder or something, some sandpaper on a die grinder, and hit it with some good primer and paint. I'm going to start by hitting all these bolts with some penetrating oil to hopefully give me a little bit better chance of success on these bolts. Hit the inside and the outside actually. Let that soak for a little while. Go ahead and do the other side, and went ahead and shot some on these little 8mm that hold the electrical connection. It's been on here 20 years, 21 years, so this should go a long way to helping those bolts come out. Yeah, that penetrating oil made a big difference, I think. Hopefully I have as much luck on the bigger ones. There we go. I got pretty lucky. Like I said, this truck's pretty rust free, but here, if I can get this out, is what can make this project a little interesting. So that bracket sets in the frame, and you can see it's got nuts welded on it. So sometimes these will break loose and there's no way to get to them. So you have to end up chopping the bolt and then fish this out of here. I doubt you can even get these anymore. I'm gonna look because I'd rather have new ones, but if not, I will clean these up and put some rust prevention on them. But luckily mine are still in pretty good shape. There's one. I'll show you the other one. So here's the driver's side. They're obviously that kind of gold anodized metal you see a lot on these trucks at one point. Not too bad for 21 years old, actually. There's what it looks like. Honestly, not near as bad as I was expecting. It's held on with 4 12mm bolts. Here it is removed so I can get it all cleaned up. I actually used some of this on it. It was a little more rusty, Did get all the loose pieces off and then sprayed it down with some of that rust reformer. And as you can see, it did turn black, so that means it's ready to be painted. And this is the stuff I'm going to use. Automotive primer on the hitch. This stuff acts as a primer, so this is already good to go. Obviously, I've taped up the cable and any other things I didn't want to get paint on. And then I've had pretty good luck with this stuff, and I'm going to use satin as the finish because I think that most closely matches the frame. 2 coats of primer. I'm going to let that set up and dry about 15 minutes. I'm going to hit with the top coat. And while that primer's drying, I'm going to go ahead and hit the tire carrier with some of the satin black. I'm going to try setting 3 because these are smaller parts. Couple of coats of primer, about 3 coats of paint. Is it show car quality? Nope, but it's a trailer hitch after all. And this was really about rust prevention just as much as it was making it look better. So hopefully I'll get another 15 years, 20 years out of that. So now I'm just gonna let them set up, and I'm gonna let them cure a couple of days. And I've got some other projects planned for the truck, so I'm probably gonna wait before I even reinstall this stuff. If you've been following along, there are the skid plates from last time. I did those semi-gloss because the semi-gloss seemed to more match the factory finish. And then here's the spare. I went ahead and took care of it too. So now it's all good to go. And I needed to order, hopefully you can see that, some new trailer hitch mounting bolts because these were smoked. This is supposed to have a washer that moves, and it is corroded and welded itself to the actual bolt. And a lot of the bolt has actually rotted away. I got lucky that none of these broke. Feel bad for you guys that live in a rust belt. Today we're going to actually go through and do the chassis. I'm going to clean up any rusty spots. There's not much, just a little bit of surface rust. Very lucky to live in an area where not a lot of salt on the roads most of the year. And when I have had to drive in snow and salt, salty roads, I immediately, as soon as the weather clears up, I immediately go to a spray off car wash and wash the undercarriage. I've done that ever since I've owned the truck, and it's paid off. I have very, very little rust, but I'm gonna go ahead and touch all that up, hit it with a lick of paint so it looks brand new. So let's jump right into it. Here's everything I'm gonna need. I went ahead and printed out the pages from the service manual on the bumper components because I am going to pull the bumpers. I've done the front several times. It's only like 6 bolts. The back looks a little more interesting, but I'll figure that out when I get there. Painter's tape just in case. Got some aluminum foil. I'm gonna show you a trick when I get to that point, and I'll show you why this is gonna be really handy. WD-40 obviously, a couple of ratchets, hand tools. This won't be too big a deal, I hope, assuming the bolts aren't super rusted. Screwdriver for the front grille. I'm going to use some sandwich bags that I label so that I can keep track of the bolts. I think there might be, especially looking at the rear bumper, there could be a whole bunch of bolts. I want to make sure I keep track of what goes where. I've also gone down, I pulled some already. If they were rusted or looked kind of crappy, I've already been to the dealership and made me a list. I ordered a whole bunch of brand new bolts already. I'm just going to replace them rather than try to clean them up. You can wire wheel these if you really want to get picky about it, but that'll remove the zinc coating on them, and then they just rust up again. And you know, they weren't super expensive to get new bolts, and when I paint everything, brand new shiny bolts will look nice underneath there. And these are the little brackets that go to the spare tire carrier. These slide up into the frame rails, and then I've already ordered new bolts for the tow hitch. These are 10.9, so I went ahead and upgraded those. I think the originals were only like standard grade, and 10.9 is like grade 8, but 10.9 is the metric equivalent. So ordered those up. But these are these little Z-bars that slide into the frame rail, and then the bolts come through the frame and connect up with these nuts to hold the hitch in place. Well, a lot of people think these are welded on from the factory, and when I cleaned mine up and looked at them, they actually aren't. They're just press fit into these straps. And I got lucky and mine came out, but I didn't want to take a chance on having problems down the road if I ever need to remove the hitch for some reason. So I had a buddy of mine tack weld them. So those nuts will never budge now. And I'm going to hit everything with some anti-seize compound when I put the bolts back in. The original bolts, they had disintegrated quite a bit and it eat up, and the washers had even fused to the bolt. So I'm going to put some anti-seize to prevent that. And these are the products I'm going to use to show you the clean ones first. A lot of simple green. I'm going to use my little spray bottle, some engine degreaser, brake parts cleaner if I have any areas that have a lot of oil around them, like the rear diff, for example.
automotive primer, move my coffee, some rust reformer in case I need that. I don't think I have enough rust, maybe on the back bumper. That might be where I use this. And then I've been really impressed. This is what I've been using on everything else. It's Rust-Oleum satin, and this new version comes with like a nozzle that has 5 different settings on it. I'm going to start with getting the grill out of the way, and it's just held in place with some of these little plastic tabs that sort of lock into place. A long screwdriver comes in handy to get these loose. 12 millimeter. Don't forget to disconnect the turn signal and fog light if you got them. And finally, the last 2 12 millimeter balance bolts. I went ahead and dropped the sport skid plate for 12 millimeter bolts, and I'm going to pull this plastic trim, which is 5 push pins. Be careful with these. If they're as old as mine are, I didn't break any, luckily. But that'll sort of get this out of the way so I can paint that frame rail there, or that bumper guard. And if you're going to fool with an old truck like this, I highly recommend you get one of these. You can see I've got replacement push pins for just about everything. I'll leave a link in the description where I got that, way cheaper than buying them individually from the dealer. That's the front done. Now it's time to move on to the back. There we go. Some of the stress off of the plastic up top, make it a little easier to come off without breaking anything. There we go. Or a couple way up here in the sides I couldn't get to from the back, so I just popped those out. That's what we got left. I had hoped I could take the bumper off with the extensions attached, but unfortunately there's one bolt on a bracket way up in here that you can't get to with the bumper extension in the way. So what we're going to do is go ahead and pull the bumper extensions off, and it's just 4 12 millimeter bolts, but this one up here, hopefully you can see that's a little cruddy. You're probably going to want to hit that with some penetrating oil, liquid wrench or something, let it soak a minute, and you want to take it out first, because if you torque on that and this starts to move, you can see it could want to bend out. So I'm going to take that one out first. Clean work area is a happy work area. Now here's where those Ziploc bags for the bolts are going to come in handy. Well, that's it for deconstruction. I did go ahead and pull the spare tire carrier brackets too. I'm going to clean those up. That's everything we got to remove from the truck. Next up, we've got to pull old Project 4Runner out, give it a pressure wash on the frame, and I got to take a look at that rear bumper. There's a little more rust on it than I really want to see, so I'm going to treat that and see if I can't clean it up. Now that everything initially pressure washed, I'm going to hit it with Simple Green, pretty much full strength, and let it soak. Break up some of that grime, let this Simple Green soak for a little bit, and then pressure wash it again. That it's not as bad as I thought it was, but it still has, you can see it's got some pretty good surface rust on there. We're going to clean that up. And this bracketry comes off pretty easy. It's 6 bolts, 12 millimeter across the top, no trouble, and then some 12 millimeter nuts. And I got lucky on these. I thought they were more corroded than they actually are. They're not great, and I did order new ones, but basically the bracket comes out in like three pieces. That, and then 2 sides. So I'm going to take these off, clean them up really good, and these will get a coat of paint as well. There it is, all sprayed. This stuff has to dry 24 hours, so I'm going to leave it and decide tomorrow if I'm actually going to top coat it. I may just leave it like that. It's the next day. I want to let the frame dry really well, and I've got all the bumper and the spare tire bracketry hanging from my tent here so I can get to everything. And since these were had the most surface rust, I'm going to hit them with this rust reformer, and then I'm going to get after the frame on the actual truck. I like this stuff.
Looks like it's going to seal everything up really well. The only downside is it does take 24 hours to dry, so won't be able to paint these till tomorrow. And before painting all this stuff, obviously I did wire wheel, sand with 400 grit sandpaper, and washed them twice just to make sure they were as good as they could get before I put that stuff on there. Other parts like the front bumper brackets that weren't rusty are just going to get some of the Rust-Oleum automotive primer and then top coated with that satin. The nice thing about the primer is you can top coat it in 15 minutes. It's not like the rust reformer, it takes 24 hours. I decided to jack up the front end. I'm going to pull the tires and wheels to give me better access to some of these suspension components while I'm painting them. And since this area probably gets a little more grime than the rest of the frame, I'm going to wipe it down with acetone just to try to get as much of it off as I can. Up here, there's not a whole lot I have to avoid. Everything's pretty well black. I'm going to avoid the spring, but that's easy because it's more shiny. This is the TRD Tundra spring, and that's how it came. I did tape up my stainless red braided brake line. But other than that, we're good to go. Just start painting. A couple of other little tricks. You can use a piece of cardboard to act as a block for where you don't want paint to go. And if you do get paint on something you really didn't want it on, like this brake line for example, you can just wipe it down with your acetone and it'll clean right up. And there is what it is going to look like. Nice satin sheen, kind of subtle but clean. Exactly what I'm going for. Now, just got to do the rest of the frame. There was quite a bit of detail on the rear diff that I wanted to, or the rear axle, that I sort of wanted to preserve. Some of the bolts I went ahead and took out. You have to decide how much of this you want to do. I've got a replacement for some of these, but I want to get the lines out of the way where I could get good access. I did tape up the parking brake cable and anything else I didn't want to get paint on. Some electrical connectors up top. I did paint the bracket for the vapor canister. I did paint those bolts because they were not too bad, but I didn't want them to rust. I also took them out and put some anti-seize on them. So that's how I've got it looking. I did wipe everything down. I have wire wheeled it and wiped it down with acetone, so it is ready for paint. But I wanted to show you that so you kind of get an idea of some of the stuff you can do. Probably most people just paint over this, but I think the shiny bolts against the satin black will just give it a nice finished, restored look, which is what I'm going for. Hopefully now you can see why I was looking to maintain some of that detail. So I just put the old bolts back in for now, but like I've got new ones for most of this, and I think being strategic about what you paint versus what you don't is a difference. Most people probably wouldn't go to that level, but OCD, blessing and a curse. And I also made sure to paint inside the back of these frame rails. They weren't bad, but these actually got primer and paint just to be extra safe. Super happy with how that came out. Here's the front. Again, it looks awesome. Using a little piece of cardboard, that's a good tip. It'll help you from getting too much paint on the underbody. Not that it matters a ton, but it does make a difference. So that's project done. Now I just need to go inside and take a bath in mineral spirits. And I'm going to let all this dry a day or two, and then it'll be time for reassembly. Everything is nice and dry. I've got the new bolts laid out with the parts they go with. Some of them came back. These are fresh from Toyota and they're clear anodized. I really wish they had been, or clear zinc, I guess I should say. I really wish they had been the yellow zinc. I kind of like those better. They're a little more classic Toyota, but I guess that's what they're using now, so it is what it is. I will be going an extra step and using some anti-seize on all the bolts, just to make sure in the future if I try to take it apart I won't have any problems. Trailer hitch, all the mounting hardware for it is painted up. Remember I have these tack welded, these Z-bars. I had the nuts tack welded on there. They're painted up too. Hopefully they'll last a long time. Even did the little wiring harness bracket, clean the wiring harness up really good. I've got everything laid out to start rebuilding or reassembling the rear bumper. So now we just got to get to it. Start putting parts back on the truck, and I'll be honest, I am glad to not be painting anymore. And that looks really, really good. Something satisfying about having brand new, non-rusty fasteners. Pop it in place. Don't forget the little bumper trim pieces. Ready for the bumper trim, and I did hit it with some back to black restore like you saw. Figured might as well while I had good access to it. Since these bolts, these are the hitch bolts, since they were the most corroded, I put a pretty healthy amount of anti-seize, and I put some underneath the washer as well before I'm going to install them. Hopefully that'll prevent further corrosion, and they're grade 10.9, so they're a little bit harder. Maybe they'll do better. And if you have somebody to help you, it'll make it way easier. So I had Miss Speedy hand me the hitch while I laid kind of underneath the truck so that I could get these back two started. And then I put some jack stands in place just to hold it. Inserted the Z-bars, and I actually found if I put them in upside down to get them over these bolts and then turn it over once it was passed, I could hold it in place to get the other bolts started. And I'm not sure what the torque spec is on these bolts, but they're a grade 10.9 17 millimeter going through the chassis. I'm going to be a little careful with the ones that go through the Z-bar, but I'm just going to hit them with the impact to tighten them down. And don't forget your electrical connection for the trailer hookup. And this is a factory hitch, and they've got some access holes or something, I guess, when they were putting the thing together, and it came with decals over those, believe it or not. Well, they're long gone, and I noticed it can rust from the inside out, so I'm going to use some Toyota FIPG form in place gasket and a couple of push pins from my box over there. I'm going to seal that up. That ought to last a really long time. You can see there the front skid plates look great, frame, cross members, back. Super happy with how all of that turned out, even the spare tire and especially the hitch. It was getting to be where it looked pretty bad, and now it all looks good as new. Now moving on to the interior, and we're going to do a refresh of the interior. And I started off, I think I mentioned before, I had a pretty tatty center console armrest, so I started off with that. So I ended up going with black with a tan stitch. I also picked up a new steering wheel cover that was leather, so I'm hoping this works out, and I'm going to put this on myself. It came with a couple of tools and some thread, and I'll show you more of that later. And I did pick up some leather glue. I don't know that it matters what kind, but you want it to be for leather and flexible. So that's what I got for some of the edges, just in case I need it. And I'm also going to pull the steering wheel, so I got a steering wheel puller. And the only reason I'm going to do that, you could technically do it in the truck if you just wanted to sit there and sew it while it's on the vehicle. But I have one on it now that I'll show you in a minute that I did that way, and it was kind of a long process sitting in the truck and doing that. So I'm planning to pull the steering wheel off and just do it on the kitchen table. As for the armrest, it came out super nice, probably way better than I could have done it. Professional upholsterer. And he did put some new foam in there, so it's even softer and more comfy feeling than it was factory. And this thing's actually super easy to work on. You got the tray here, and it just sets in like that. And then it's got these little Phillips head screws that you put back in or take out if you're going to do this yourself. There's about 10 of those, I guess. So we're going to put those back in real quick. And it is plastic, so you just want to get them snug. And you start by feeding the legs in to the slots, really easy. And that will lay down. And there's a hinge in the back with two Phillips head screws. We're going to put those in next. Make sure the screws seat all the way and you don't get any more play out of that hinge. There we go. I think that looks really good. And wait till you see what I have planned for the interior. It's really going to look good when that's done. There's a better view of it from the driver's side. It's been a couple of days. The weather's not the best today. It's hot and muggy and probably going to thunderstorm quite a bit. So I thought it'd be a pretty good day to be inside. So I'm going to knock out this new steering wheel cover today. The only real special tool you're going to need is a T30 Torx bit. Some of them come in a socket style, but you're going to need like a longer one to fit through the plastic of the steering wheel. I've got these that kind of go into a screwdriver, and what I'm planning on doing is using this guy, and it's magnetic, and the other end, this is made for like a little impact gun. The other end is a 1/4 inch. So this is going to kind of be how I'm going to do it. Set it up just like that, and there's my tool, and this will easily go inside the steering wheel cover. The puller I talked about before, I'll show you how to set this up in a minute. You can sometimes just grab the steering wheel and yank it off, but I don't want to fool with that. You can rent these for free basically at the local auto part stores. That's what I did. And then a 10 millimeter. I'm gonna have to disconnect the battery because of the airbag. So I'll go over there and get started. I like to put a rag over the post just so I know it doesn't connect back up by accident. On the back of the steering wheel, there are these little plastic plugs, and we need to pop those off. I'm going to use a little plastic hook tool, and there's some T30 screws back here that will allow us to get to the airbag or get the airbag off. Be careful these don't go flying because they are kind of small, and there's one on each side. On mine, for some reason, once I had the screws backed out, the airbag wouldn't release. So I went and got a long magnet so I could reach into the hole there and just sort of pull the screw back in case it was bound up. And I found if I locked the steering wheel, that made things a little bit easier. And now the airbag will pop right off. And then we've got the airbag connector right here, which has a push pin right there. And then airbag is now out of the way. And when you store this, you want to store it face up. So I'm gonna put it on the workbench face up, and that's in case for some reason the airbag were to deploy, it doesn't become a projectile. If it's like that, it becomes a projectile. If it's like that, the airbag just goes off. Not the end of the world. You don't want that to happen, obviously, so keep it away from electrical stuff, but at least no one will get hurt. Next, I am going to disconnect the cruise control connection. It's a little tab in here. Wasn't too bad. And now all that is left is the 19 millimeter steering wheel lock nut. I am going to unlock the steering wheel and just point it straight. Like so. And once I have the nut off before I actually remove the steering wheel, I'm going to mark the steering wheel and the threaded column that it connects to so that I have an indexing mark for when I put it back on. 19 millimeter. And this only gets tightened to like between 30 and 40 foot-pounds. I think the field service manual says 37, so it didn't take much. Here's where I'm going to make my index mark. Make one at the top and one at the bottom. That way I can't mess it up. Try to do this one-handed. That's all there is to it. With the tool out of the way, just pull the steering wheel off and be careful of the airbag connector. And I actually put this one on in the truck, and that's why I decided to pull the steering wheel this time and do it somewhere where it could be a little more comfortable. I got the old cover removed pretty easy, and I did degrease. I used a degreasing cleaner on the steering wheel because as part of installing the new cover, you use some double-sided tape to sort of hold it in place, and you'd be surprised how much grease your hands can leave on your steering wheel. So I degreased it twice actually, so it is ready for the new cover. And I did also remove the two little Phillips screws here and here that go to this plastic cover, and that was so I could lift it up and that way when I tuck the new cover underneath, I can be sure to get it all the way behind that plastic trim piece, and then it will look factory. So now we just got to get started installing that new cover. The 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and 9 o'clock positions to the steering wheel, and then coming back like halfway between the spokes or the center and the side and sticking that, and kind of going around and getting started with the tape before we start threading the needle. All the taping is done, and I found using a pair of tweezers to peel the little pieces of paper off made it much quicker and easier, and pulling those screws out definitely helped me get the cover underneath the back trim so it'll actually look factory. And then of course on the front, the airbag will cover up these sections. And I did pick up a little bit of leather glue just in case I need it. I'm going to see at the end, once I have everything stitched, how that lays down. But it's already looking really, really good. And I actually went and put it back in the truck to line up 12 o'clock, since I do have the index mark in red, to make sure I got that right. And everything's looking really good. Next up is to start stitching, and I think I'm going to start probably somewhere in here to get used to it. And the idea will be sort of get it pretty close and tight in the curve, and then every other stitch. So probably every stitch in here, then every other stitch through here. So this will be a good section to start with so I can figure out what I'm doing. I'm moving along on this thing, and I didn't want to bore you guys, sitting here watching me sew for a couple of hours. And I wanted to kind of figure out some techniques so I could give some tips. And I'm not real good at sewing. I've done very little of that, so I had to sort of figure it out as I went. It comes with instructions, but they're obviously written by someone who English is not their first language. So I'll try to show you some of the ways I came up with doing it, but I sort of broke the steering wheel down into sections. So from inside, so here to here, from here to here, from here to here, and now the last section I have is this final piece across the top. What I will say is you want to make sure when you bring the two sides together, use your hands to bring the material together and then stitch it. And I'll show you some of that here in a second, but you don't want to try to pull the material together with the thread. Even though it is nylon thread, it's very strong, but you run the risk of tearing or breaking something. So you want to squeeze it together, and you want the seam to line up with your original seam so that the threads are all nice and even all the way around. What you don't want to have happen is it wave or move to the back or come, do something like that. And that's where that tape comes in handy to sort of hold everything in place. And you pull it through all the way till you get to the knot. See, the knot stops it right here. And then you want to go through the top or the outside in, again through an existing hole if you can find one, which I recommend. And you want to do that twice. Do that 2 times to give you a really nice, secure, tight starting point. And then it's really just kind of connect the dots. I'll just do every other stitch, and you can see it sort of changes. See the threads? Sort of gives you a nice pattern. That's what it starts to look like, and you can see some of these other ones, some of these other ones that I've done where I hit sort of every stitch in those curves, and then every other stitch down here. That one. See? Then I pull it through. And I've found that I'll do, 2 or 3 stitches. Like there's one, then I'll come back up. I'm going to catch the next one at the top, up here. Pull the thread through. And after I have 2 or 3, I'll take a look at my work, because now is your opportunity to make it perfect. And I'll sort of squeeze it together, get it set like I want it, and then give the thread a little bit of a tug to set it, basically, to set it up. Hopefully you can see that. And like I said, I'll go back and forth. So I'll hit this one, then this one, then this one, then this one, then this one. When I get probably about right here, I'll do every other one. Thought I'd show you a little bit of how every other stitch looks. So you can see I've hit this one, I've come through this one, I'm going to skip this one, I'm going to go through this one. I'm going to squeeze the leather together as I pull. Skip this one, Go to this one.
I finished stitching this up, and I want to show you one of the more confusing things, at least for me, is how to bind off the end when I had finished a section. So you can see I came through the last loop, and then I went back through the same hole on the opposite side so that I came back through the leather. So that's step one. And then step two is you back stitch just like you were doing before. You're just going backwards. And you only have to go up like 3 or 4, make sure you don't catch an edge like that, 3 or 4 stitches. Next up, I'm going to deal with these little extra pieces with a little bit of fabric glue. There it is, completely finished. And I came in and glued these down and strategically cut some little pie pieces out if it was wanting to bunch up to make it lay flat everywhere. And I did the back as well so that everything is tucked behind the plastic cover in the back. And it looks like it actually came from the factory this way. That's how I try to do all of my projects. So this leather wraps way down in there. So when the airbag cover's on here, all this will kind of fold in and just disappear. Installation is just the reverse of removal. Feed the airbag harness through the top of the opening in the steering wheel. Make sure you line up your index marks on the steering wheel and the steering shaft, and then install the steering wheel set nut. 7 foot-pounds. Reconnect the cruise control plug and the airbag harness. Remember, leave your battery disconnected. Like so, and then just set it in place. And tighten the Torx 30 or T30 Torx to 78 inch pounds, not foot pounds, inch pounds. It looks fantastic and is a huge upgrade over what I had. I'm digging the 12 o'clock index mark in red. That's going to go real well with what I've got planned next. Super happy with how that turned out. Some people said they had issues, and I don't know if it was with the East detailing cover, but similar ones not fitting well around the edges of the spokes. But as you can see, this one is just like factory and looks really, really good. It looks like it came on the truck, which is sort of what I demand. When I do something like this, I don't want to say perfect, but I get it as close to perfect as I possibly can. So now something a little more fun. I've always wanted a little bit nicer interior. The truck did come with leather, which I think was a rare option for an SR5. That's the model that this 4Runner happens to be. It's a 2002 SR5, and it actually came with leather from the factory and sport seats. Now, I don't know how that happened or why that happened, but that was sort of unusual. So I found that through Catskin, you could custom make your interior. You could pick the colors, the stitch colors, the material, and something I always wanted, I could add heated seats. You could technically add heated or cooled or heated and cooled seats. Okay, so here, what I came up with. Here are the heating elements, and I did do the back and the bottom of the front seats. There should be 2 of those. And I have taken a look at the wiring, and I really like the way they did it. It's super simple. Everything is self-contained. You have 1 ground that'll go to a chassis bolt probably under the seats, and you have 1 ignition switched power wire. Everything else is contained in the heated seat wiring, and you can see that switch there. They even have a low and a high, and the paperwork that came with it said the LED will actually light up green on low and red on high. This is a biscuit color with black inserts, and this is all leather, and it's nice leather too. I mean, super soft and supple, I'll call it. Much nicer than what's in it from the factory. And this insert right here is perforated. So this part, and then on the bottom, there's the seat bottom, it's perforated up to about there where that line is, and this is all smooth leather.
But again, that's what it came up with. Gentleman I got them from was able to do TRD logos. So I opted to do that in red. Remember, we did the steering wheel, had the red stripe in the center. It's one of the reasons I wanted it to all kind of line up and sort of keep that theme. And since I'm working on the interior, I'm gonna go ahead and knock out another project, and that is new rear hatch struts. Mine have gotten to where in the wintertime, they've gotten old and weak and they won't hold the hatch up and it hits me in the head. There are two different versions of these. These are the cold weather version, which means they'll be a little bit stronger. There is the part number. If you need some, put those on real quick as well. And it's just 4 12mm bolts, top and bottom. You may need a helper to hold the hatch up after you take the shock off. All right, those are replaced. Let's test it out. Oh yeah, takes a lot more to close it. And it opens all by itself, brand new. And I do recommend you go with the Toyota shocks, whatever you want to call these things. A lot of the aftermarket ones don't seem to last very long. My originals lasted over 20 years, so I went back factory stock. And finally, I'm going to do something about these tatty floor mats. Yeah, that's more like it. Well, here's the finished product. Super happy with how it came out. Got the perforations like I mentioned. They're heated. TRD logos are in here. I'm digging the colors. Even the back carries that same color theme through. And these are all leather. Everything but the headrests. For some reason, they no longer make the back headrest leather. They used to be, but these are vinyl. Be aware of that. But other than that, I had the switches mounted up on the armrest area close to the rest of the switches for the windows and door locks on the passenger and driver side. And when you have the ignition keyed on, which I do, down turns the LED green, and that is low. That's off. Up turns the LED red, which is high. It's perfect spot for the switch. And the heated seats are something I have always wanted in this vehicle. Our other vehicles have heated seats, and even sometimes in the summer I'll run the AC and I'll just turn the heated seat on because it just feels good on my back. It's like a heating pad. And I'll be honest, I've been sitting here with this one warming up for a few minutes. I've got it on high right now, and these feel a little bit better than even our factory heated seats in our other cars. Like, it's coming all the way up to like middle of my back and all the way down to the back of my legs. So I think you get a little bit more heated area, and it feels like it's going to be warmer even. So super happy with how everything turned out. So this video will be really good for anyone who's doing inner or outer tie rods or just replacing the boots. I'm going to show you what I've got put together to get this job done. It's not very hard, but it can be expensive if you have it done at a shop. So let me show you what I got. Here are all the tools I'm going to use to get this done. The special ones you're going to need: some cotter pins, a torque wrench that goes to 83 foot-pounds, which is what the tires are torqued to. And I borrowed this, or did the Lona tool thing, from a local auto parts store. You'll need the front end service kit, and this is to separate the outer tie rod. So I'm going to use that one. I've done this before. If you saw my lower ball joint video, you know I've done this before. Obviously I'm going to use my impact, and here are the new boots. I went with the Beck Arnley because a lot of them came with a zip tie for the inner side of the steering rack boot. These come with metal clamps, which I like much better. There is the part number. Again, I'll leave a link in the description if you need some. They feel much higher quality even than factory, to be honest with you. They're more pliable. They feel a little more rubbery. The factory one's a little bit plasticky feeling. Of course, they're 21 years old, so it might have something to do with it. But there's the boot, and here's the metal clamp that goes on the inside. A lot of times these were zip ties in the kits, which no way I would use that. I want it to be metal. I highly recommend you get an alignment anytime you mess with this part of the suspension. But I've taken a silver Sharpie and I put a witness mark from the threads across the lock nut and the inner tie rod end so that I can get it back close, and it'll be close enough to get it to the alignment shop. Now I'm going to loosen this lock nut just a smidge that'll allow me to remove the outer tie rod so we can get that boot off. Once we get this loosened, we'll have to go after that 19mm castle nut and take the cotter pin out. The lock nut is 27mm, and the outer side of the inner tie rod is a 28mm. The reason that's important is you don't want to go cranking on that lock nut and just letting the outer tie rod flop around. your lock nut with another wrench so that you've got something to stabilize it while you break that free. Factory torque spec on that is 41 foot-pounds, but I've had it aligned a couple of times, so it could be tight. Be prepared for it being easy or hard, but have a backup plan just in case you have to really put some torque on that. So I didn't have a 27 and a 28 millimeter, so I'm using these adjustable wrenches. And you want to, like I said, put some tension on the inner tie rod so that you can hopefully break that nut loose. There we go. I turned the steering so that this side of the steering rack is extended to make it easier to get to everything. Pulled the cotter pin out, and this castle nut is a 19 millimeter. I always like to rethread the castle nut back on upside down before I use the puller. Be careful of your rubber boot. You don't want to get that. Then you just slide the puller in place. And they're designed to accept a 3/8 ratchet. Then you just tighten it until it pops loose. That was anticlimactic. Okay. I always like to keep the castle nut with where it came from. So now, I took this straight off. So now what we want to do is we want to count the number of turns to unthread it. So I've got the lock nut set just barely snug, and I'm going to start counting the turns. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there's 15. So that's 15 and a half. 15 and a half turns. And what I'm going to do is take my Sharpie and write 15.5 on here so I don't forget. If you're replacing tie rod ends, this is exactly what you would be doing. However, mine still feel really good. They're still stiff, and these are kind of expensive. So some people say, why wouldn't you replace it while you're here? Well, these are like 80 bucks. The inside ones are like between 175 and 200. And you can see mine still got quite a bit of tension in them. So I'm going to say these are good. I want to get the maximum life out of them that I can. So I'm just going to put them back on after I replace the boot. Next up, I'm going to get the spring clip out of the way. Easy peasy. And now there's a clamp on the back. They're sometimes reusable. I'm not going to reuse them. I'm wondering if I can just slide that off. No, I'm going to have to stretch that clamp out a little bit. So I used a flathead screwdriver, and I got back in here and sort of stretched up that metal clamp so I can get some snippers on it. Try to just cut it. There we go. See if that worked. Okay, I got the clamp snipped. Now we're just gonna, slide the boot off. Ugh. Be ready for a little bit of a mess. There's the culprit. There's little holes that got poked in the boot. And it's kind of a plasticky feel. Like I said, the new ones are pretty rubbery. And the reason this is important, and I'm glad I caught it quickly, is water was getting in there. And luckily nothing's happened, but you wouldn't want water to set in here around this inner tie rod. And speaking of which, if you were doing your inner tie rods, this is where you would take that off. There's a flat on the steering shaft or the rack and pinion. On the back side, you can't see it, but it's like right here. You would back it up just like we did the outer tie rod. You would hold the steering rack, and then you would put a wrench on a flat here. There's a retainer that you'd have to hammer out. It's like a lock washer, but it's one of those that you bend over. You would tap that out and then break this free, unscrew it, thread your new one on, obviously with a new washer, and tap that back down. I'm not replacing mine. As you can see, they are in really good shape, but I am going to give it a really good cleanup and repack it with fresh grease. I've repacked the inner tie rod with grease, and I put a light coating on the steering shaft as well. I also put just a little bit around the edges of the boot to make it slide on easier and not give me any trouble. we go, easy peasy. Now I'm going to put the band on the back first, and then I'll probably turn the steering in a little bit before I put the front spring clip on. It's going to be too dark and hard to see me put this band on back there, but I'm going to show you how it works. Basically it uncoils, and you can see it's got a little retainer right here, and then it's got two, I'm going to call them tabs. So what I'll do is I'll loosen this up enough to get it over the boot, then I'll tighten it, slide this through the little retainer, and then I'll use a flat blade screwdriver and probably a little hammer to tap those two tabs down. Easy peasy. 14 and 15. So I'm going to call that good to get to the alignment shop. Hard to see the paint mark or the Sharpie mark, but I counted, wrote it here, so I know it's good. Now I'm just going to reconnect the tie rod. Put the castle nut back on. And the torque on this dude is 67 foot-pounds. So there is 67 foot-pounds. Pro tip, you want to make sure the hole in the outer tie rod bolt part or threaded part faces front to back so you can put your cotter pin in. And it looks like I actually got lucky on that one. 67 foot-pounds actually lined up with one of the notches in the castle nut. If it doesn't, you want to tighten the nut a little bit more until you can put your cotter pin back in. Got a new cotter pin put in place. The last thing we have to do is tighten that lock nut. The factory service manual says the torque spec is 41 foot-pounds. I don't know how you do it other than maybe a 27 millimeter crowfoot wrench or something. I don't have one of that size. So what I'm going to do is just put these wrenches on it like I did before and snug it up good and tight. I'm gonna call that good. I gotta take it to have it aligned anyway, and the alignment shop's probably not gonna, they're not gonna torque that bolt. They're gonna get it nice and snug like I did. We're gonna call that good. Put your tire and wheel back on. You can lower the vehicle. Don't forget to tighten your lug nuts to 83 foot-pounds, and you wanna use a cross pattern. But these flares, because they stick out, especially back here where this protective, it's kind of PPF before PPF was really a thing, I guess, but you can kind of see where it's been beat up pretty good. So that's kind of letting it down. It's the same on both sides. I did try to remove it, and the paint starts to come off with it. So you're kind of in a bad spot with this stuff after it's been on here for 20 plus years like mine has. So my plan is to start by removing these flares, which I had hoped would be easy with just some bolts, but it's not. There's rivets and plastic clips and all kinds of stuff involved there I'm gonna have to deal with. And I'll need to replace this trim strip. And I believe, if I looked at the part numbers right, these trim strips, not super expensive. It's sold by the foot, I believe. I need to get it, and I'll get into all that in a little while, but I think it comes color coded to the truck. So I'm gonna start by trying to get these flares off of here. These are the tools I think I'm gonna need to get this done. I've got my impact to get the rear tire off. You're gonna need clearance to get to the rivets. Speaking of that, you need a drill bit. I'm gonna use a 1/4 inch. You just wanna knock the top of the rivets off so that they'll break free. Obviously you'll need that drill bit. 10 millimeter socket. I've got a hammer and a couple of punches in case some of the rivet remnants are left behind. I might need to tap those out. Another 10 millimeter wrench, flashlight, a couple of pry tools. And I did put tape on this one. This is probably one of my favorite. If I have to go against the body for some reason, even though it will be behind the flares, I still want to protect it as best I can. And then I'm going to use my cordless ratchet to make things quicker. All right. When you get it right, the little rivet head will just pop right off on the drill bit. So there you can see that is now free. Yeah, my clips are really old and brittle, and all of them broke. So, oh, one didn't break. Got one. Be ready for them to go flying. And if one of the rivet heads starts to spin and give you trouble, just take a flathead screwdriver, put some tension on it while you drill the rest of it out, and it'll hold it still. And this is where I recommend making really good notes, or better yet, just take a photograph, take a picture, so you remember you had a blue clip and 2 reds. I don't see anything else on that. There's where the 3 rivets were. And they actually stayed, the remnant stayed in the flare. So I'm going to use that 9/16 drill bit and just drill on those a little bit till they fall out. And my clips did break, which I figured they would. So like I said, these are old. Sometimes to get these out, you can just turn them. So I'll probably use a little wrench, try to turn it, and they'll slide right out. If they don't, then I'm gonna use that same method where I'll use my puller or my pry tool, get in behind it, pop those out. Once you got the little 10mm nuts removed, this will just pop right off. You can kind of get an idea of what it looked like on the back. Here are the little tabs I was telling you about on the back side of the front flare. So just be aware of those. You don't want to break them, obviously. So now I've got all of these removed. Next step is to get them really, really clean. I'm going to clean them up really well, and then get with my buddy that has the paint shop and find out what we need to do to get them prepped and painted. And I'm going to also replace this little protective film piece. So I'll remove the rest of that, and I'll get some new film to put that back like factory. I'm going to get this all cleaned up. That is about 22 years worth of gook. I'll clean that up really, really well, and especially where this leftover gasket, where the flare met the body or the door, there's a little bit of gasket material left. I'll get all that off, get that nice and clean. And finally, I'll source some replacement clips. I need 8 for the back, and then I need 8 red and 6 blue. I have found these online pretty cheap. I think a whole bag of 20 blue and 20 reds, like 12 bucks. I'll try to locate these. I'm sure I could find those as well. If I can't, I'll need 8 of them from the dealer, and they're probably $1.50 a piece. Not terrible, but no way I was going to save these being so old. And if you had the extra pieces that went down the door, what I recommend is just stay as close to the tabs as you can. If you have the factory service manual, you can kind of see where they are. Just keep your hand as close to that as you can, and you can pop them out. You're probably not going to save the clips. Unfortunately for those, there's a whole bunch of them. I think there's like 30 on each side, so there's a bunch of those clips. I'm glad mine doesn't have the door things, but if yours does, you can try to stay close and not break them, but if they're old like mine are, plan on replacing. Once you've got it warmed up, just apply steady, constant pressure with the razor blade, and it will peel off. Once you've got all that plastic film removed, get you a rag and some acetone. And all you have to do is just start to gently wipe the glue off, and you'll start to notice the paint's going to come off too, but don't worry about it. I've got all the glue residue removed, and I don't think I mentioned this, but before I ever started, I did go ahead and remove the little, they're called pads is what Toyota calls them, but they're really just the little gaskets. So they're all sitting over here on the floor, and I laid them out in the order they went on the truck. I'm buying new of those, but in case I need to use those to get the measurements right, to clip the new ones or trim the new ones, I kept them just in case. And I did wash all of these parts 3 times with simple green. You want to do that before you start any type of sanding, because if you've got a contaminant on here, one of the worst things for paint is tire dressing. I'm going to use some of the 400 wet dry sandpaper. Yeah, it goes a whole lot faster when the paper's wet. So there's how far I took it down. I wanted that whole section sanded to give it the best chance of looking good after paint, and then I'm probably going to put some new material over that. Hopefully the newer stuff is a little bit better about not cracking over time, but you know, it did last 20 years, so I really can't say too much about it. But that is now done. I'm going to do the other side the same way, and then I'm going to put all the parts that'll fit in the dishwasher, like I said, get them super clean, and then I'm going to give everything a nice sand down with 400 grit paper, and anywhere I see a little nick, I'm going to feather that out and probably take it down almost to bare plastic like that is, just to give it, you know, the best possible chance to be smooth. The primer and flex agent that we're going to put on will have some build quality to it, but paintwork is 95% prep. Don't tell Miss Speedy. We used the gas door and ran it through I think it was a spectrophotometer, probably at the paint store, and then they used that to come up with like 6 different shades of paint, and they said the bottom one would be the darkest and the top one would be the lightest. Painter went with the lightest based on his experience with it being a 20-year-old truck that had been sitting out in the sun, and the paint matches perfectly. They are back. I'm going to show them to you. You can see there how nice they look. The clear coat, I mean, well worth the effort to have these things painted. It's really going to help the truck look nice and really go along with that restoration that I'm going after, and it'll really lift it up. I'm super happy. Time to give old Project 4Runner a spa day. It's been a long time since it's been fully detailed. It needs a decontamination wash, a good clay bar, and a good polish, and then I'm going to put some ceramic coating on it. Okay, we got the decon wash done. We're gonna go after it now with the fallout remover, and you just mist this on the cool surface. Try to cover it as even as you can, and it should start to show some little purple spots as it works. That's it pulling the iron out. It gets other contaminants too. And I'm gonna work from the top down, and I'm just gonna keep an eye on it, make sure it doesn't dry out. I like this one, it's gel, like I said before, so it's kind of clinging to the vehicle a little bit better. And even though this stuff does stink, I do got to say this one's not as bad as most. Griots did at least try to put a little bit of lemon scent in it, so at least they did do that. So I'm just going to start wiping it down now. So I got the decontamination wash done as well as the fallout remover. And if you've heard of the baggie trick, been around cars for all, you probably have. You can put your hand in a baggie and gently rub it on the paint, and it'll kind of help you feel the contaminants that might be still in the paint. And I did this before the fallout remover, and I could feel quite a bit of stuff remaining. After the fallout remover, it feels quite a bit better. I still feel some, but not near as much. So the reason I choose to do the fallout remover is it saves me labor when it comes time to use the clay bar. Gonna give it a good mist of the Speed Shine, which is the lubricant in my case. I've got a towel to wipe any drips or runs, and that's all there is to it. You just literally wipe it on the paint, nice and easy. Doesn't take much, and this will make a huge difference in the surface of your paint before you polish. I've got the light polishing pad prepared with just 4 dime-sized drops of the 3D1 polish, and the reason it's called 1 is it's because it's supposed to be all in one. It'll do cutting and polishing all in one product. It's supposed to stay workable longer so it doesn't dry up and get dusty on you, and you basically set the aggressiveness of the product based on the pad that you're going to use. Way brighter in person, and the nice thing about this stuff, there's no fillers. So this is true paint correction. There's nothing in there filling scratches. It actually, the microfiber towel was squeaking on the paint when I was buffing it off. So hopefully you can see how good that is. Around with some image editing software, and I thought a cool graphic might look kind of good, but to get it done, we're going to need a couple of squeegees, some water with I did about 15 ounces with like 3 drops of dish detergent in it. You want just enough to give you some lubricity, but not so much that the vinyl won't stick. I need some alcohol to wipe everything down with. It's already been cleaned up and prepared, but this is the final step so that the surface is about as clean as you can get it. Some tape and a knife and some scissors. So I'm going to show you how to get this done, I hope. Propyl alcohol on this rag, and this is the area I'm planning to put the decal. So I'm going to wipe it down really good with this alcohol. The next step is to take your paddle and just gently rub over the vinyl, and this is to make sure the transfer tape is seated securely against the graphic. I've triple checked with a lot of measurements, making sure I took a measurement from here to the edge of the door and from here to the bottom of the door all the way down. I feel pretty comfortable with it, and I've got it taped in place now, and I found sort of where the center would be, and I'm going to use what they call the hinge method. So what I'll do is I'll peel the graphic back this way and lay it over on top of itself, and then I'll put my soapy water solution on this side and some on the back side of the graphic, and then lay this side in place, use my squeegee to get it set, and then do the same thing with this side. Peel it back, peel the paper off. So that's going to be my plan of attack. One thing I will say is you do not want to get the paper wet, so be really careful with that, especially on the first side, because you're going to have some paper sticking out. Keep your soapy solution away from the paper. That's my goal. Let's see how we do. I'm gonna go super slow. This isn't a race. I want to make sure the vinyl comes off of the backing paper. See how it's kind of having to get it started there? Especially around these letters. I'm going to be pulling, back, not out. And again, just going to go super slow, especially around the 4Runner lettering. And there's the finished product. I think that's going to look awesome. And there is the other side done. So the final step in this detailing series or project, I'll call it, is to put a ceramic coating on it. I'm doing this to, number one, protect the paint, but number two, to make it super easy to clean. If you've been following the channel, you know I'm pretty impressed and a fan of ceramic coatings. And I chose this specific one. This is Adam's Graphene Ceramic Spray Coating. I did the advanced one. It's got a little bit higher, or much higher content of the ceramic in it, so it'll last a little bit longer. I chose that one because it's easy to apply. You can actually put this on everything. And I think this even has some kind of UV dye in it, maybe to help you know you covered everything, but I can see it pretty dang obvious, to be honest. It's got a pretty stout smell to it, so be ready for that. Try to do half the hood and then wipe it and come back and do the other half. Put it on everything, so I'm going to do the windshield wipers and all of it. I'm going to get another minute or two Well, this stuff flashed maybe 3 minutes. It says when the rainbow starts to disappear, it's ready to rock and roll for buffing. All right, the rainbow effect is starting to disappear, so I'm gonna start buffing the product. And you don't wanna go in circles, you wanna go back and forth, just like this. It takes 4 hours to cure, so once it's all finished, I'll leave it for 4 hours and then I'll do a little test to see how slick it feels. But I can tell you already, you can see, there you go. When you start sliding a microfiber like that, the surface is pretty slick. But hopefully you can see how good that turned out. And I think technically you could probably use it on the plastic trim too. It did brighten up or restore the window trim. I was hoping it would. And the roof rack. It was basically gray before I put the graphene spray ceramic on there. So that turned out great as well. And I like that you can use it on glass and everything. Made it super easy to do. And this original Toyota hood protector, air splitter, whatever you want to call it, I did everything to it too. I washed it real well, clay barred it, and I polished it with that 3D1 to make it look like new. And I even put a new coat of paint on my Satoshi grill over there. Now it's just time for reassembly. Now for these parts you're going to need if you decide to work on these flares. The first thing are these red and blue clips. Make sure you take a photograph or make notes of where the red ones go and where the blue ones go, because they are different sizes. So you want to pay attention to that. I will leave a link in the description of where to get these, a whole pack of like 40 of each for, as of this video, about 12 bucks. So I got those online, link in the description. The ones I could not find online are Toyota part number 90249-06132. You need 8 of these, 4 for each side, and these go on the very back fender flare. Mine all broke the little head off of them when I removed the flares. These are the ones that were sort of expensive. They were about $12 was the list price at Toyota, which is crazy for one little clip, and you need 8 of those. Here's what the reds and the blues look like compared to the original factory. This is new. This is the factory one that came off the truck. All of the little tabs broke. So I tried to save them, but they're 22 years old. Here's what the red one, whoops, here's what the red ones look like. And as you can see, you always want to compare your new parts. They look identical. So I think these are going to work just fine. Then you're going to need what are called flare pads, and they're different part numbers. Well, I shouldn't say that. The front flares, the front wheel arch flares, are this part number right here, 53853-35090. And I believe the B1 might be your paint code. You notice these are silver that match my truck. So they are body color, so you will need to pay attention to that. These are long, obviously, because that whole front wheel arch is a pretty big piece. All the rest of them, every other flare on the truck gets this part number, 75659-35040. I'm not sure how long they are. I'm assuming some are going to be longer than you need and you just trim it, but that's the 2 part numbers. Every other one of them had that same part number. Rivets. You could probably go back with some kind of screw, a little black-headed screw. That might be the easier way to go, but my OCD gets triggered, so I actually ordered, and I got these online again. I'll leave a link in the description of where to get these, but they're Toyota part number 90269-04047. I think I got a pack of 25 for 10 bucks, so not too terrible. The only thing I'm looking at is that is an awful long rivet to just hold a flare in place, so I might have to modify these, and if I start feeling like it's not doing right, and I'll test a couple in my rivet gun to see how they're going to do, I might pop the rivet part out and then take my Dremel and cut this off a little bit shorter. I don't know that I need that much material to pull down for the rivet, but anyway, those are the factory ones. You notice they are painted black. This is the clear protective film that I got. It's called Armor Up. I'll leave a link in the description to this. It did come with a nice little squeegee. There's other brands. I've not used this before. We're going to see how it does, but it was 3 inches by 5 feet, so that should give me plenty. A few 10mm wrenches. I'm going to need a sharp knife and some scissors, tape measure, and that's all for this stuff. Baby shampoo and distilled water. This is crystal clear film, so you want to be really careful what you use to put it on, or you might see specks. And this is going to be kind of like a lubricant spray, similar to how when we did the vinyl graphic. We'll spray it on the clear protective film, spray it on the flare. That way we can move it around while we get it set. And it's basically 1 to like 500, I'm going to say, mix. It was like 5 15 ounces of water and like 1 milliliter of baby shampoo. So just a little bitty bit in there, and you just kind of swirl it around. That gives you lubricity. I've got my assortment of pins in case some of these, like for the back mudguard, they didn't do too well. There's some in here that will fit and look factory, so I'm going to go with that. The special tool you're going to need is a rivet gun if you decide to use rivets like I am. I'll leave a link in the description of that. And then a heat gun also to help with this clear protective film. So that's really about it. Oh, and some rubbing alcohol, and that's to wipe down the edge of the flare before you put your flare pads on. So that's really about everything you're going to need. I'm hoping these don't fight me too much, but let's get after it. The first thing I'm going to do is get the protective film installed on the parts I want to put it on so that it can be drying and setting up while I'm working on the rest. And I took some notes and pictures of where the original factory protective film was, and it lined up with a body line. So what I did is mounted the flare on the vehicle temporarily, made a mark, that black mark up there, so I would know how big of a piece I needed. I got that cut, and then the factory had a little bend in it, so I went ahead and replicated that. Pay attention to which side you're on, and I found a 27 millimeter socket worked well. Just set it on the paper and then cut it with a razor blade. So now we need to get this installed on that. Here is the finished product. I don't even know if you can even see it on camera, maybe just barely. But hopefully you can see the edge there. What I did is lined up the back edge with the edge of the flare. You notice it does line up with my black mark that I made, so it matches the body line. And then I had it come just around the edge of that curve so that all this is protected, and I came all the way down. And when you're working with this stuff, try not to touch it where it's going to be on the flare. I actually, you can kind of push on it and lock it when you have it in place. And then anywhere I was going to pull on it, I had like extra, about a ½ inch hanging off here, and that's what I used to sort of stretch it around that three-dimensional shape. And then a little bit of heat gun to get it around that corner. And then I used a razor to just trim off the excess. So that is ready for the flare pad. And I gave this front piece, this is the part that goes down below the front bumper. It's kind of hanging out there pretty exposed. I gave it the same clear protective film treatment as that back quarter panel or door piece. Now that I got the protective film installed, that was kind of a pain in the butt if I'm honest, but it's finished. I'm going to start being sort of strategic about how I'm going to put these flares back on. I'm going to start with the front and put the little wings. They were pretty dinged up, so I had those painted too. I'm going to get that done. And then I think it's going to be best to do the front fender right here first, and then the little nose piece on the end here second, and then move my way to the back. So that's how I'm going to get it done. When installing the grill, I find it easiest to put the little clips into the grill itself and then snap it into place. I'm going to get the flare prepared for the flare pad by wiping it down with that rubbing alcohol on the edge here where that flare pad will go. That'll help it stick a little better, I think. And this one's the most awkward because it's so big. Now we're going to put the flare pad on, and since this piece is so big, it's a little bit awkward. I'm going to start at the very front, so the top side, and work my way down. And the way this is, it's just a little, it's got a little sticky back to it. I'm going to start by just peeling off a little section of it so I can get it started. And I'm going to get it right up against this little tab and start setting it in place. And I kind of played around with this, and it felt like doing it this way with it facing me was easier. to get it set in place. You don't want a gap or anything between this pad and the flare. And now I'm going to put the pins in, and I referenced my picture I took, and you want to pay attention to how these go in. So they go in, the flat sides are facing up and down, and your connectors that snap into the body are up and down. And it is red, blue, red, and blue. And now it's just a matter of sort of carefully wiggling it into place. Remember, you don't want to break these tabs off the back, so you are going to have to kind of hold your mouth right to get this in here. And next, just put the 10mm bolts in place. You don't want to over tighten them, just get them snug. Next up is this, what I call the nose piece. And I did go ahead and put the flare pad on here. Pay attention to this one because it does sort of roll up inside the flare there. That's how I set mine up. And then this was one where the pad was actually longer than the flare, so I just kind of cut it off even with the bottom. You're not really going to be able to see a lot of this because these are just little 10mm nuts, 4 of them that go on the back side. So I'm just going to get this on here. The nose piece is on. I couldn't show you the bolts because they're hidden, but a little stubby ratchet and a ratcheting flat wrench got it done. I've got the flare for the door prepared. You do have to trim, obviously, the flare pad, and if you're picky like me, pay attention to the ends. I cut them at just a slight angle so that it fit flush on the tab. And then your pins are red, red, blue, plus some pain in the butt rivets. There's 3 rivets on this, so we're going to have to deal with that. But for now, I'm just going to snap this into place. Now we'll get to the rivets. And if it doesn't break on the first go, pull the tool back all the way. Yeah, see, this wants to be a pain. All right, it worked. So that's what you want to have happen. It breaks off the rivet. Now we move on to the other 2. So there's the 3 rivets in place. And I must have not had it adjusted right before because I got it adjusted right tonight apparently because all 3 did just fine. We've still got 2 rivets left on this last quarter panel piece, so we'll get to it next. It's rinse and repeat for the rear quarter panel. Same deal with the flare pad. Now this flare pad is made to size, so the pad is made for this size flare, so you may want to sort of stretch it a little bit to make sure it fits, and if you have a little bit left over like I did, just cut it off at an angle. And then these pins just slide in to the tabs. And it just snaps into place. That, and then we got 2 rivets we got to put in the bottom. There's a problem I've been having. It broke off the stem at the back, so I'm going to have to snip that off with some wire cutters. And finally, bolt the rear mudguard on with the 3 10mm bolts. And finally, the 2 push pins. Well, there it is, finished up. Now I just have to do the same thing on the driver's side. And boom goes the dynamite. There it is, totally finished. And man, what a difference it made. Remember how beat up these were? Looked terrible. Now they look good as new. And this new paint protection film, I don't even think you can see it. I mean, I have to walk by, and I lined it up with, this is the body line right here that I lined it up with. Did the same thing on the other side. New coat of paint on that. Lined it up with the body line. Yeah, everything's looking real good. So not technically difficult, you just have to take your time, and it is a little bit time consuming because it's 22-year-old pieces that you're working with. You want to be careful not to cause any damage or anything like that. That's looking really good, and that's a wrap really on the restoration of this 2002 3rd Gen 4Runner. And I hope you followed along in the series. If not, be sure to check out the playlist because we did everything. All the maintenance, timing belt, valve cover gaskets, painted the valve covers wrinkle red while we had them off. New radiator hoses, coolant flush, all the fluids have been changed. Got the exterior done, polished, ceramic coated, flares painted, look like new. Interior, which I love, definitely updated, a little bit more modern and sporty, which kind of fits the character of the 4Runner better. I'm loving the heated seats now that it's turning a little bit cooler. And one last thing I think I'm gonna do is convert these chrome emblems to black. I'll probably use Plasti Dip, but there's a million videos on how to do that, so I'm not gonna bore y'all with that. And that's really a wrap on this project. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please give it a thumbs up if you did. Please check us out on Instagram. It's at Speedy's_garage, as well as the website, www.speedysgarage.net. And hopefully, I'll see you out there.